ask was like if this was going to be on YouTube or not, and if I needed to like get dressed, but I did put a shirt on. So
I think we pass all the YouTube requirements if we do that.
okay.
Yeah, I think we will, just because there are some people that, for whatever reason, watch these things. I don't know why. I could never do it, but some do. So we put it there. The first place I want to get into this with you is, I guess it's a couple years old, so it's kind of out of date, but I just came across it. Your race report from the 2021 Cocodona. It's titled "What a Time to Not Be Unalive: A Not So Appropriate Musing on the Cocodona 250." And after reading it, I was trying to like make sense of it, and it's like Hunter S. Thompson meets Lord of the Rings meets ultra running, and there were some amazing bits in there. Why did you choose the style you did?
I actually don't know that it was that intentional. I just felt like it was that, I don't write race reports. I've never written a race report, and I think you could argue that I still haven't really written a race report, even though that's kind of, in that area. But it's like, I just thought it would be interesting to kind of write something that was like, not like, like race reports a lot of times are like pretty boring. They're just like, oh, and then I ate this, and then I felt like shit, and then I ate this, and then I felt a little better, and then it's like, I don't know who wants to read that stuff, but it's like, I don't know. I just thought it would be interesting to write something like what was actually just kind of going on in my head the entire time, like as I pass people, like the things I think about, and it just sort of came out in this very like sort of like punchy, yeah, like you said, Hunter S. Thompson style of like writing, and yeah, just like I think just being like a like sci-fi fantasy nerd too is just like that like that's just like kind of the stuff I think about while I'm out there. Like I like, I don't know.
What are your influences in the sci-fi space? Like, what are you drawing from?
Oh God, I don't know. It's just like, yeah, like I've always been obsessed with like Dune. I've always been obsessed. Like I'm a huge Tolkien nerd. Like obviously, if you read that, it's like pretty obvious that. And yeah, it's like, and so I kind of draw influences from that, just sort of in an imagination sense. And I don't know. I don't write that many things. I wish it was something that I did more of. And it's always been a goal of mine my entire adult life to like carve out more space for like writing, and especially creative writing. And like I said, I don't always find the time to do it, but yeah. So like all of that just to say, like, I don't know. I had fun writing it. It was like this cool little thing, and there was just a lot going on that first year. And I think especially like doing mushrooms at the beginning of that year, which I also did this year, by the way. But it just sort of sets a direction for your experience, and I don't know. It makes me feel a lot better when I'm like running up Eldon at mile 240. That like, this probably wasn't as hard as like Frodo and Sam running up Mount Doom to like destroy the ring. So it's like I draw a lot of dumb motivations from stuff like that. So
I was fortunate to come across it just before this year's Cocodona, and I was running. So after passing through Crown King and getting to that kind of like a Rastra area, I couldn't help but think about like the Mines of Moria references too. So in the preamble to it, I was pretty cool. I was like, oh, like it added perspective and life to my own experience. And not, like you said, not a lot of race reports do that. It's a lot of it. I don't want to say it's not a transactional experience, but you're typically clicking into those to get advice on how to do things in the future. And I didn't necessarily get lessons for how to execute Cocodona. It was more just like adding local color and really rich history and context to it, which I appreciate deeply.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, which is easy for me to do. I mean, like I've, growing up in those hills and just experiencing all that stuff and just like sort of putting that lens on the entire experience. And yeah, just writing a silly story basically is all that race report is. It's just a big, long, silly story. So it's awesome that people like it, and that people like you, like future runners of Cocodona can read it. And that was actually a big part of me actually releasing it is because it kind of sat. I think I had it written for like, quite a long time before I finally decided to share it publicly. And uh, but yeah, just wanting to give back positively and sort of um, to Aravaipa and the whole race, Cocodona in general, is like it's a race that I care about and it's a race I feel involved in. And so yeah, just wanting to give things to that and make, contribute to the lore of Cocodona a little bit, which I feel like that's all I've really done is contribute to the lore of Cocodona. So
there was a quote. There were many quotes in there that stuck with me. One of them, you say, "I have to prove to myself that this world is worth being in," which I think is a really unusual take on existence. Explain that thinking more.
I mean, that's a day. I mean, it's a little easier now. I have a daughter now, and I'm not quite so like, I'm not living in this like constant state of existential crises these days. I'm a little more calm, but I don't know. I feel like I'm a person who is constantly seeking validation for existence and trying to find things that validate my own experience in my own life and making sure I'm not wasting it. And I'm not really a religious person, so I sort of believe this is all we have and trying to make the most of that. And yeah, and it's hard. I think sometimes it's really easy to get drugged down in this world. This world's a tough place, and there's a lot of bad things and a lot of negativity with human beings in the world, and it's easy to go down those rabbit holes. And so finding things for me to feel excited about and feel stoked about, and meeting people that also I live in sort of a difficult place in this country, culturally speaking. And so for me, getting to experience these races and these things with other like-minded people who are all about experience as well, and sort of living life to the fullest, whatever that means, or whatever sort of tropes you want to throw in there. But yeah, it's hard, it's a constant battle to or not, maybe not a battle, but it's a constant sort of practice that at least I have to engage in continuously to sort of, I don't get a lot out of things I've done in the past. I don't look back on things I've done and feel like super proud or like, oh, that was awesome, I'm super fulfilled. It's like I kind of have to keep looking and keep experiencing. And that's kind of my whole identity. It's kind of wrapped up in a nutshell right there. So
you mentioned sort of it's been a struggle, at least recently, to be in the environment you're in. And I could be mistaken. I always thought that you were kind of waving the banner for how awesome Arizona is and being proud to be there. Talk about that more.
Yeah, well, I think I am very, I do love Arizona. I mean, I don't love it culturally. I don't, I think yeah, this might be one of those conversations, if we get too into, needs some editing, but it's just like I have a hard time with a lot of traditional American values, and I live in, somebody told me once, and I don't know if it's true or not because people use superlatives all the time when they're not true, but somebody told me once that like the county I live is the most conservative county in the United States.
Wow.
So it's like over 90% of our people vote for Donald Trump. And I would also argue that the town I live in has the highest per capita of like shitty bumper stickers and flags on their vehicles. So that's like a lot of what I see when I'm like driving around town and meeting people. And the people, like, I don't have that many good friends who actually live in Prescott. Most of my good friends live either overseas or in other states. So yeah, so without getting too negative, I'll say, that's about, that's sort of culturally the world that I live in. I would say like geographically and like outdoorsy wise speaking, I think Arizona is one of the most amazing places in the world. I mean, the diversity of stuff you can do here is pretty amazing. And I think it's hard for people who have lived in the Southwest to ever leave the Southwest. I think that's like a really common thing, because it's pretty nice. But yeah, so I do have a lot of Arizona like pride in that sense, but it's not really revolved around the culture, the people, all that much, you know, like, and that's actually gotten worse, I think, lately. I used to be, just growing up in Arizona in general, I've developed a really high sense of like, just sort of tolerating a lot of that stuff. And I think that actually comes from my background of hitchhiking. Like I hitchhiked for like, since from when I was like 18 till I was like, I don't know, 10 years or something. I probably everywhere I went was hitchhiking.
Wow.
So when you hitchhike a lot, you develop this like personality skill of just being very agreeable with whoever you get in the car with, like no matter what they have on their agenda that they feel like they want to talk to you about. You develop a skill for being very agreeable to things that like you don't necessarily agree with that much. And I think I'm starting to lose that now. And I think maybe part of that has to do with having a daughter and having a kid in this world. Is I'm a little less tolerant of things that I perceive to be negative. You know, like guns, for example. Like I live in a very like pro-gun place, where a lot of people's identities is wrapped up in carrying guns on them at all times. Like, you know, like my sponsors from Paris, and they always come here, and literally every single time somebody new from Satisfy Running comes to Prescott, that first night they come over and was like, I was in the fucking grocery store and there was a guy wearing a gun on his belt. And it's like blows their minds. And it's like, well, it's like half the population here like carries, you know? And so it's
Sure.
like, so with something like that, whereas I've always just been able to ignore it, now that I have a daughter, it's like, okay, like you're not allowed to come over to my house if you have a gun on you, like period. Like if you can't take your gun off before you come into my home, like you're just not invited over anymore. Like, sorry.
Yeah.
You know, so like I think that's a good example of like I've gotten like less tolerant of things, but I don't know that that's a bad thing. I don't know. It's like we always preach tolerance and everything, you know, but I'm getting like a little like shorter with it. Like, you know, it's like I don't know. So
I mean, maybe as a positive to all of that, if there is a positive, and this is just my subjective opinion, it seems like when you're in a place where there is an overwhelming majority or status quo, that's where the coolest countercultures exist across the world. And there are some really beautiful things that happen when you have something very clear to react or respond to. I don't know if that's been your experience, but
yeah, no, I mean
like that yin and yang, there's a really cool yin and yang opportunity there.
I mean, growing up in like punk and hardcore bands and like skateboarding my whole life, like clearly, I mean, I think 99% of like punk rock is reactionary, which is like, you could argue isn't actually very punk because you're just reacting to whatever, you know what I mean? So it's like punk rock to me is more about like being genuine and authentic, and however you can be that. Just reacting to something and doing the negative of that your entire life is something I've done, like for sure. But I've also like reflect on that. And if I'm just reacting to things, if I'm just reacting to whatever like it is in popular culture and doing the opposite, then that's not very like creative or original either. So it's like, sure. But I do think you're right. Like, I mean, like Salt Lake City, you know what I mean? Is like
great
like,
punk scene, great underground punk scene. Here.
It's like, I mean, even the hardcore scene is like one of the most like violent hardcore scenes like in the country, like back when like when straight edge and like, so it's like, yeah, like Salt Lake City like tends to take everything like way too far because they're growing up in this like super oppressed culture, you know, like I mean, it's like, I think Salt Lake's pretty known for that, you know, and but no, I think you're absolutely right. And so like, you know, like I don't think I'm like super unique or special. Like I am very much a product of my environment. Like I grew up in Prescott, Arizona, and it's like I think a lot of things about me, even though we all like to pretend like we're super unique and like special, like I'm definitely a product of my environment. And I think that there are a lot of things about my personality and about my lifestyle that do reflect like sort of Arizona values and culture, but sort of on these big picture stuff, I have a hard time with it for sure. So I think it's also why I grab onto people sometimes. Like I think I did that with Satisfy. Like when I met those guys, I was like, you guys are really fucking awesome, and I just like grabbed on, and it's like we're all like best friends now, and it's like, so when I meet people that I really click with or jive with, I become friends pretty quickly with them, because I've sort of like I don't have a lot of that in my like day to day, so. But.
With coming back to Cocodona, you mentioned that, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it was cool to sort of contribute to the lore of the race, which I think is a really interesting way of thinking about it. In that race report, you said that after year one, you could tell this race is going to change, big things are going to happen. Aravaipa kind of changed the game a little bit. So you were expecting it then. I'm curious to know, like, 4 years on, are you happy with the way things are tracking? Do you like the direction the race is going in? Because I know that this is going to be your last year racing it. So talk about your thoughts on where it stands 4 years in.
Yeah, I mean, I was right. It's like it's this big thing, and I mean, I don't think I was like the only one that perceived that. I think that was like a general feeling after that first year, and after the live stream, and just like the amount of attention I got for it. You know what I mean? Like I've never experienced something like that before, and I'm not one of these like, but I'm not one of these runners that's used to a lot of attention. It's like before Cocodona, I think people knew who I was because of like a couple things through running, but you could just tell that there was something, like there was some sort of buzz around that whole live stream and that whole week and that whole thing, what was happening. And then you fast forward to what the race is. I mean, even this year, and like your experience, and I think, yeah, like you mentioned, I think in one of your emails, how you perceive it going even crazier, which I do as well. And that was a big part of me agreeing to be a part of this documentary that's being made about the race this year. Was I was initially a little bit apprehensive about being a part of it, and then I sort of realized that for whatever reason, even though I'm like constantly deflecting and constantly trying to push that stuff aside, there are a lot of people in this world that sort of see this like alternative way of being a part of the sport, and they see me as the person that like represents that for whatever reason. And so just sort of setting humility aside for a second and like filling those shoes. And I think it is important, especially if it is my last year running, that this is sort of my like put my stamp on the race and put how I think people should approach this race and experience this race, and like sort of wish it well. And because the reality is, like, as years go by, like, like I'm not going to have that opportunity. So I do hope Cocodona grows as naturally and as appropriately as possible. But I mean, that's a hard thing. I don't even think Jamil's really in control of how these races. I don't think any race director is really in that much control about what happens to the races. I mean, there are certainly things that you can do, but yeah, I mean, just this whole like the whole hyper competitive like influencer shit that exists in our sport now. It's like I was in Bryce all last week because I marked the trails for those ultras up in Utah. And
sure.
We were like sitting around a campfire and like talking about like, why do I even care? Like, why do I give a shit? Like, why do I care how anyone else is experiencing the trails out there? And I think that's a good question to like ask yourself. Like, why do we care how other people are experiencing these races or these trails? And I think when you have something that's like trail running that has become like a big part of who you are, and it's like it's an activity that is like really special and dear to you, and you see people coming in with motives that you don't value, you don't appreciate, and you not only see them doing it that way but also being praised like publicly for doing it that way, and it's wanting to like hold that thing that you hold dear and keep it how you think it should be, I guess, which isn't necessarily great, but it's what it is. And I, like I said, I do care about Cocodona as a race. I do care about, I care about a lot of other things too, but I'm not making documentaries about other things. So,
well, you mentioned as you get older being less tolerant, which I can empathize with. I'm not quite as old as you. I'm maybe a couple years behind, but I'm also entering into that stage of thinking. You clearly have a style. You clearly have a point of view, which I also appreciate. One thing I'm excited about with this movie is, to me, it represents like 4 distinct points of view and value in sort of like perspectives on the sport, all clashing on one start.
Yeah.
Like I love that value clash. And I'm wondering if you do too, like despite having maybe just like sort of like I don't want to say rigid, but you clearly have a point of view. Do you appreciate the opportunity for your point of view and your worldview on trail running to be in the arena with like, this hyper professionalized, hyper influencer? Like, do you appreciate the opportunity for all of those worldviews to kind of like do battle at Cocodona?
I do, yeah. And I actually think that's like kind of awesome. Like part about the sport is that like, it's actually one reason why I like racing in Europe, because like the percentage of like those the opposite end of the spectrum runners of me, like that's a lot higher. I feel like in a lot of ways I'm sort of like a North American trail runner like stereotype. You know what I mean? Just like dirty fucking trail runner, and it's like, but that doesn't really exist in Europe. Like almost everyone over there is like that other thing that you're talking about. And so like I think it's kind of funny because like, especially if I can do well at races, it's like all these like hyper competitive guys that are like taking shit really seriously, and like I come running by with like hairy bearded, no shirt, and like on mushrooms, and I'm like, it's like, so it's like I do get a little bit of a kick out of that, like for sure. But yeah, and I think like Cocodona this year was like special too, because like I got to spend time with like so for listeners that don't know, the film is following like 5 or now 6 of us actually, because of what happened at the race. And I got to spend time, minus McKnight, I got to spend time with all of those guys for pretty sizable chunks of the run. And I think what's cool is that like, like myself and Jeff Browning don't like have that much in common to like to talk about, you know what I mean? It's like he's a very serious athlete, and he like knows a lot about like shit, and I don't know anything like that. And but I think it provides opportunities to like find things that you do, like me being a new father and him being a father of like teenagers and adults. And it's like Jeff and I just talked about being dads for like 5 hours, wow. What I mean? And like got emotional about stuff. And it's like, so I think it provides those opportunities to like, just because people have different interests or than you do, doesn't mean you can't find like common ground on, we're all out there running 250 miles. We all have something clearly in common, but it's also like finding those things. Like I'm sure, with other runners, like he talked about like diet and like pace. That was actually one thing, is like my experience this year was like it was very clearly that they were all racing each other. I would say the other 4 runners out of the top 5, like they were all like clearly racing each other. And I had never experienced that at Cocodona. Like I don't think any other year that I've been a part of it, did it ever feel like a race, or did it ever feel like there was competition and this year, like it did. Like those guys were like constantly checking like where the other runners were on the like live stream, and about like pace and about how many calories they took down and like blah blah blah. And it's like, well, I built a mini ramp last, so it's like, it's like, so just that was interesting this year, just to sort of experience that competitive thing. I think it's also like I actually really love that I ended up in 5th place though, like because it just felt like those other 4 guys were taking it more seriously. So like they deserve to be up there, and it's like, so it was like in a lot of ways, because I didn't ever feel like I was racing. I just sort of feel like I had the best seat in the house. Like I just got to be up there with those guys and like experience their races for however much amount of time. And it was really awesome just to get to know those guys better and to experience because I'm not super hyper competitive or like know a lot about like, like Jeff knows every fucking thing there is to know about how to be a good trail runner. And I know absolutely nothing about how to be a good trail runner. So it was just really interesting to get to experience the race through some of these other lenses, of these serious good athletes, and that was kind of awesome for me until obviously I fell back and lost track of all those guys. But yeah.
Did it make you want to be them at all, in the sense that you observed what it took for them to log those performances and seeing them throughout maybe the first couple of days of the race, where you're like, I kind of want to be that to some extent? Or were you like more observational, being like, I've seen what it takes. I see who they are, and I'm still going to stay who I am.
It made me want to like I keep bringing up Jeff, but like Jeff is such a fucking professional. Like it kind of blew my mind. Like, because a lot of the times, like, it doesn't surprise me that he did so well at Cocodona, because a lot of Cocodona is just minimizing the time wasted over 3 days. If you're being competitive and trying to be as fast as you can, there's like, I think between myself and the winner, like, so I was in 5th place. So like the top 5 guys were within like, I don't know, 5 hours or whatever the times were, like 5 hours of each other. Like there's not a lot of that time is made up or lost during the running.
Moving, yeah.
A lot of it is the time when you're not moving. And so it doesn't surprise me. The ones that were best at being like ultra runners, at being athletes, at being professionals, I think did the best. And especially like with the sleep thing, like I wasted so much fucking time this year trying to sleep and being unsuccessful. And like if you can lay down and just go to sleep, like you're going to do really well at Cocodona. I think like if you can lay down and be out for 15 to 20 minutes, I think that you have a skill set that works really well at Cocodona. If you've had insomnia your entire life and can't ever sleep like me, then it's like yeah, you just and not being able to sleep starts to snowball. So like that second night, every single aid station, you're like, I have to try and sleep again. And so you're laying down at every aid station, like through that second night. And it's just like, so anyways, like I was blown away by Jeff's professionalism. I mean, the first day at Cocodona, I got to Crown King, and like, I just wasn't in the mood for the circus that Crown King is, and everyone yelling and like in your face and like trying to give you shit. And I just got like flustered. I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And I just like put my pack on and left. And I left and caught up to Jeff. And right when I caught up to Jeff, I was like, oh shit, I left with 0 calories for this 16-mile stretch on the first day. So like Jeff gave me like 4 gummy bears. He's like, here, like eat the, and it's like, so that's just what I mean. Like he's a professional and I'm clearly not. I'm just like running into these places like, I don't know, like just give me some food. And I mean, I could be better at it, but I'm like, I don't. Or like at Whiskey Row this year, I built my own waistband this year out of like a bunch of prototype belts that Satisfied made me, and like sewed them all together. So I had this like mega belt that I wanted to use for the night sections at Cocodona, because I don't wear a vest very often or ever besides at Cocodona. So I like by day 2 and 3, my shoulders and neck start to hurt really bad. So I was like, well, if I can make something where I can carry everything I need for the night sections, I can give my shoulders and neck a break. And so when I got to Whiskey Row, that was the first section that I was going to do that with. And I put my waist belt on and I headed out and I ran about 8 or 9 miles, and I was behind. I was almost to Iron King, and I realized that I left my fucking tracker on my vest back at Whiskey Row. So I spent like an hour on the phone with Steve and Jamil, like talking about like what I could possibly do. And it was either, well, I can continue or be disqualified, or I can go back to Whiskey Row. I was like, well, that's my whole fucking race is over. You know, it's like, and I got really lucky because I don't wear a watch either. So I wasn't like tracking anything. And I got really lucky because my phone in the background, like the fitness app, tracks shit without my knowledge. So it was the first time like something ever like that ever happened to me, where I was like super stoked, and I was able to pull up like my mileage and send them my exact location and like prove that I had like, and I was with other runners at that point. So and like Arlen, and he was like, other runners would have vouched for me. Sure. And like and so Steve just made a decision where he was like, well, like, you know, based on like all the, but anyways, I was like sitting on a rock for like an hour, like sending him screenshots and sending him like GPS tracks and like all this stuff about how like, and so I say all of that to say, like, I'm not trying to say that I should have done better or I could have done better. It's like, I think I did about as good as I could. Like, I think every runner out there had some experience like that, where they, you know, like String Bean ran the wrong way on a trail and like ran into Jeff in the Dells. Somehow String Bean got turned around and was running the wrong direction, and then like hit Jeff, and Jeff was like, oh, you're going the wrong way. I mean, I think everyone has screw ups, but I think the ones that won, I think the guys that got like top 2, top 3 at Cocodona had the least amount of fuck ups, basically. And I think that comes from being on the Jeff Browning side of the spectrum, not my side of the spectrum.
But it's so interesting to me that someone like you, and just based on what I can tell, you're not a killer, right? Like, you were not frothing at the mouth to like kill your, like really like destroy your competition. That someone like you with your disposition can do as well as you do at the front of these races. Because maybe that's just something that's unique about ultra running. But when I think about sports like basketball and football and UFC and stuff like that, like, I don't feel like you can thrive with that personality.
No, I think Cocodona is good for calling that shit out in people too. I mean, to a point. I mean, there's still like people out there competing with each other, obviously, but I think that's why I like ultra running, because like the longer you go with stuff, the less that shit starts to like sort of bleed away. But yeah, I mean, I think that was another aspect to me agreeing to be a part of the film, was like just to show people that like you don't have to be like this like hyper competitive, like you said, foaming at the mouth, like David Goggins douchebag to be like good at the sport. You know, it's like, so I mean, like, speaking of David Goggins, I only found out who David Goggins was like 6 months ago. And my wife and I like watched like some of his stuff, and it connected a lot of dots for me, because you see these like hyper competitive, there's this thing that's happening in trail running right now, and it's like this like it's this like super masculine, super macho, hyper competitive, like the language these people use, like we're like, I'm gonna destroy Cocodona, like we're gonna conquer the core. Like, how the fuck do you conquer a terrain? Like, you can't. Like, I don't know. It's just like this like super aggressive language that's coming. And I was like, and then when I found out who he was, I was like, and I like watched some of his shit, and I was like, oh, that's like where this is that where this is coming from? Like, all these people are trying to be like this, and it's like, I just don't think. And so again, the becoming less tolerant of stuff, I'm disgusted that that's a part of something that I care about so much. That sort of mentality of like celebrating the failures of others. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to win a race and to set a course record or like do whatever. It's like, and to celebrate your own personal achievement and to celebrate like, good job. It's another thing to celebrate the failures of the runners around you. Like the people who wish ill will on runners that are ahead of them, if you're being competitive, like that sort of mentality, I'm disgusted with the fact that could have a place in a sport that I hold dear.
Yeah.
And I just, like I said, I'm getting less tolerant of it. And I don't, you know, I just, So again, agreeing to be a part of the film is like try and influence people to have some better values, to have some of like why we do of why we're doing these things. And again, one reason why I've agreed to be a part of a race like Cocodona is I think of races like Cocodona sort of force you into that. I think races like Cocodona have a way of humbling people and like especially people who have never experienced the multi-day running thing. Like I think you're like I don't know if you would ever experience anything like a multi-day run. But yeah, maybe I'll interview you. Maybe I'll ask you about like your experience, like just experiencing something like Cocodona for the first time, you know?
Well, and I'll answer in a second, but I just want to bring up one, and I'm not going to call it a counterpoint. I'll just call it another perspective, because there are people out there, and again, maybe this is more relevant in other sports, but they would tell you that great performances and generally great competition is suffering from like this mental health awareness movement, right? Where like people are becoming more mentally healthy. And because of that, they're losing that edge that has generated amazing results in years past. So like, I mean, I know you're a basketball fan, like Chris Paul, I'm not saying he's mentally unwell, but like Chris Paul and Devin Booker and Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, like they start to get mental health counseling, they get things right in their head. They're no longer the killers on the court that won, 6 NBA titles and were just relentless. So, what do you think about that?
I think that you were a part of a conversation that we were having last week around the campfire, where I said that literally exact same thing. I said
Really?
that I think that people in sports today, like especially fans, especially older fans, they get really, really upset when their teams loses and the players don't, it doesn't seem to like affect the players very much. And they get upset. They're like, how can I as a fan care more, or at least appear to care more than the players do? And it's like, well, one thing, that player is getting paid, $250 million to play a sport. And he's like a young 20-year-old. These are like young kids making hundreds of millions of dollars. The world is their oyster. But also on top of that, I think, and this is what you're talking about, is that mental health is like not a shameful thing to talk about anymore.
No.
And these kids are coming up, like I think this younger generation is like they're at least aware of mental health. And yeah, I mean, I think the examples you used are really awesome. I think Kobe Bryant is like not a mentally healthy person. And as a result, like, yeah, the players today can handle losses a little bit better than I think players of previous generations. And I think that, yeah, sport is suffering from that. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I'm like, again, like just like these conservative American values, I don't think like hyper competitiveness and like these like hyper capitalistic ideas of like crushing everyone around you and everything in front of you, is that good for you? Is that good for anybody? So like I think the fact that I have a running sponsor is like a great example of what we're talking about. Like and so I think that there is a space for, especially in today's world, way more than any other time, to like, and especially in ultra running, it's like, I don't know. I think it's why I'm still a part of the sport, and why I'm still doing it is like, I think that there's a lot more that goes into trail running for people, both on the individual and cultural level, than other sports. You know what I mean? There's a lot of other reasons that we do it other than being competitive. So I think that there's a big space for like non-competitive, like I was like, at no point during Cocodona did I ever wish that I was like, man, I really hope Arlen slows down so I can catch him. It's like, no, like, fuck yeah, Arlen, like this is your first time ever running more than 100 miles and you're fucking crushing it, and I'm like so happy for you.
Yeah.
And like and like I was at, so another unique thing about the Cocodona and the live stream, so I was out on the Arizona Trail, like running towards Eldon, probably like 235 or whatever mile I was at. And I was like watching Jeff and Harry finish. so I'm like out there running, like watching this shit. And I started crying like out on the trail, like after watching it, just because like, I mean, one, I hadn't slept in like 60 hours and I had just run 240 miles and I was like feeling super vulnerable. But like, I just felt for Jeff so much. Like, I just like, I was with my pacer Marlena and I was like, I'm going to start crying right now. She's like, go for it. And I fucking was crying like on the trail, just like running. And I just like,
Right on.
I just felt for Jeff so much. And I was like, not because I wasn't happy for Harry. Like it had nothing to do with it. I was like super happy for Harry. I was like, and blown away and impressed. I was like, that's fucking incredible what you did. But I also just felt for Jeff so much in the same moment. And I just couldn't hold back. And I was like, so I want everyone to, and it literally has nothing to do with like what place you came in. Like I was so stoked for you. I was blown away by you. Like I think that like, and a special thing about Cocodona is you're aware, you do get little bits and pieces of what other runners
Sure.
are doing, or like what else is going on out there. And like, I mean, everyone knew what, I mean, you got 7th, is that right?
Yeah.
So like, and I would include Jeff Garmeyer in this conversation too. Like everyone sort of knew what the 6 of us could do. I don't think it was like surprising to anybody what the 6 of us did. We all knew somebody was going to run 60 hours. I think we're all capable of running 60 hours given the perfect race. And just a couple people did. And I think that that's fucking awesome. I don't think anyone out there knew that you were going to do what you did out there. And that to me is like, fuck it, that blew my mind more than whatever happened in like the 6 runners ahead of you. You know what I mean? So it's like and just like Jeff Garmeyer's run, like he fucking crushed it. And it's like everyone just did so awesome. And it's like the fact that like there's this persona out there that like wants to crush those people ahead of you. It's like, fuck off. Like get out of my sport. Like go back to wherever shitty thing. Like, and again, I used to be more tolerant of this and I'm just not. I'm just sick of trying to like be tolerant of it. It's like, I don't know. So yeah.
Do you think you came into the race a generally content and happy person? Like, do you feel like you were as well adjusted as you could possibly be compared to, again, like the equivalent of someone who has a Michael Jordan type personality on the start line of Cocodona?
Yeah, I think so. I think I mean, I think having a daughter last year has changed it's just changed my entire outlook towards life. And just, I mean, all the things people say about it is like,
yeah.
I just have like everything I did, everything I do and continue to do is just like wanting to do things that like make her proud of me. And when she's old enough to be able to like, yeah, I mean, it's like Flota. It's like the fucking Flota can, you know what I mean? Like to me, that's like kind of like, it's like a little embarrassing, you know what I mean? It's like, and it's like, and then just realizing that like Float is not about me. Like Float is about my friends and family, like getting to hold a can of soda, like with me on it.
Yeah.
And like laughing and being stoked about it. And like my daughter, when she's old enough to be able to see a can of soda with her dad on it. It's like, so yeah, I think all of that, I've never been more well-adjusted than I am now post having a kid. I think for somebody like me with my personality type, it was like everything I needed to feel like this life is worth living. And she's given me that for the first time in my life. And so I think even besides that, I think that I was never a person like when I won Cocodona the first year, I wasn't like filled with this like overwhelming sense of like satisfaction and fulfillment. You know, it's like I never got a lot out of like I've won a bunch of races. Like I've won a bunch of other 100-milers, and it's like that never did a whole lot for me. You know what I mean? Like people even ask me about that first year at Cocodona, like I don't think I ran that well. Like personally, I just base a lot of my runs off of like how well I do personally. And so like, I'm not more proud of that first year than I am of this last year because I won the first year. I think I ran better this year. So I'm like more stoked about my experience this year. I do think maybe I had more fun that first year. This year I was like not having that much fun for whatever reason. But I think time and I think place is one aspect. I mean, if I can, I didn't ask him if I could talk about him, but like talk about Jeff Garmire, for example. Like people, I saw people were pulling up his like, because he's finished 4 times and have like pulled up his yearly time every single year. It's like, it's an incredible progression, but I don't think that that's really that indicative of, I don't think he was more successful this year than other years. Obviously I can't speak to him, or I can't speak to his experiences, but I think time and what you place in a race is just one perspective of how successful a run can go. Like if I run Cocodona in 65 hours and have a miserable time versus if I run Cocodona, like that first year, Jeff, I think ran it in like 96 hours or something like that. But if he had a better time, that's more successful of a run. Like I don't give a shit about your time. I don't care about your place. If you had like a better experience and a better time for 96 hours than you did in 68 hours or whatever he ran it in, it's like, and so I'm not trying to take that completely away. I'm just saying like your time is only one aspect of how successful your run is or how successful your run can be.
Yeah.
And running Cocodona super fast may not be your goal that year, may not be anyone's goal. It was my goal this year for sure. And like, so I tried to run it as fast as I could. So I think I had a little bit less fun, but, yeah. And again, not trying to speak for Jeff. I have no idea how he feels about his experiences out there, but, like I still like, the first year I ran it in 72 hours and it's like, but did I have a better experience? Like, I don't know. I had a very different experience. So
I would also argue that the first couple of years of any event, but especially an event like Cocodona, it's more an expedition and you're more figuring out the endurance piece of it. And maybe 2024 was the first year we really dabbled in speed. And that's what was the big differentiator this year,
I think so. Yeah. I mean, with all races and with all FKTs, you see these like big jumps, right? And I think this year was a jump. And I think it was a good jump. I think the course record this year is a lot more indicative of an actual course record than other years. Like I think breaking 60 hours is always gonna, I don't know if we'll see any like, I mean, I say that there's always jumps. So like, Cocodona will get faster. And it's like,
yeah,
we'll see.
The last thing I want to say on the competitive mindset piece, and I'd love for you to weigh in on this too. And I should also state for the record that while I love what has been produced from relatively unwell human beings, obviously you want them to be healthy, and because the other 20 hours of the day matter just as much, and it seeps into family life, friends, etc. But like, it's crazy to think that Michael Jordan never happens if he has access to like regular mental health therapy. The entire 90s Seattle grunge movement, like Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden, none of that stuff happens if it's taking place in 2020. So like, what does sport look like? What does culture look like? What does music look like?
I'm glad you brought up
everyone's
art.
well adjusted.
I'm glad you brought up art, because I think art and music has suffered in this generation as well. I think so. I think that maybe I don't, as far as like my perspective and just like being in the like underground like music scenes, and maybe this is me just being an old guy and being like, oh, the fucking kids, or whatever. It's like, but it does seem like there's a little bit less of like underground music, like scenes just in general, like, and I think what's really interesting about, people talk a lot about social media and people talk a lot about like the current state of the human condition or whatever. And I think, you said how old are you? Like 35?
I'm 32.
So
But
like,
the way I was raised was like good art comes from embracing like the dark side of life, if that makes sense.
yeah. So I think even the 6 years between us is a pretty dramatic 6 years, because I mean, that's like my generation is like, I think millennial, it's like the last generation to not have the internet growing up.
Yeah.
So it's like, when I was a teenager, like, and I think this is a pretty dramatic difference between me and you. Like when I was a teenager, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the internet. So like we were the last generation to be bored, essentially. And I think boredom is what leads to like good art. And so, or like good anything, like good skateboarding, good sports, like good, like you just become obsessed with playing guitar or doing anything. And it's like, and being in bands and going skateboarding, it's because you're fucking bored and you don't have anything else to do. And so like, and I think to take that even further, it was the last generation that we had to pour all of our energy into creating things to not be bored. And I think not only do kids today and generations today not have to do that, they have to pour all of their energy, and it has to be a very intentional like decision and practice to create boredom. So it's not just that they're not bored, is that it takes a huge amount of energy and effort to remove all of that and get it out of the way, just so you can have a canvas to even like start playing guitar or start doing anything other than being constantly entertained the entire time. So and I think that is a huge fucking deal. I think that that's a really crazy thing. And I mean, and yeah, I actually don't even remember why we're talking about this, but I think that like, I think that is one thing why trail running attracts so many people, especially in today's world, or why the sport is blowing up in general. It's that people always ask me if I like listen to music or podcasts while I run, and it's I'm obviously obsessed with music. Like, I mean, I have like a band room behind me, and I've made music my whole life, and I love music, but like I never listen to music or anything while I run, because running is like my meditation. Running is my quiet space. Running is when I turn everything off. And it's like, or even like the night before Cocodona, people are always asking me, is like, oh, like, are you nervous? Are you like ready? And it's like, no, like running's the easy part. It's like I get to go out and just shut off and be turned off from the world for 3 days. And it's like physically that might suck at certain points, but it's like a super privileged thing that we get to do, is just like go run around in the wilderness and be shut off from the world around us for a little while. And it's like, and I think that's why the sport is exploding right now, is because like people, like, you don't necessarily get that in other sports. You know what I mean? Like even something like rock climbing, like it's a pretty social activity, and it's like, I mean, you need somebody to climb with, and it's like anyways, but it's just like other activities, you don't necessarily get things. You don't get that like quiet space for 12 hours a day. You know what I mean? And that's really attractive to people. And it's why a lot of us run, and it's why a lot of us gravitate towards continuing to run. And yeah, what was the question?
Well, we were talking about just what happens to the state of competition and art and literature, etc., when people have grown up with mental health being a priority.
Yeah, but I think in the same way, like going back to the being reactionary, comment, I think that there are a lot, like I actually have some friends who are like 18, 20 years old, and they seem to be a lot more well adjusted to the whole like internet social media thing. They're like, because I think it's reactionary now. I think it's like kind of counterculture to like not be on Facebook, not be on Instagram. And I think that there's a lot of people that are choosing to do that now and sort of shut themselves off to it. So, I mean, culture is always, culture is repetitive, and culture is cyclic, and, generations swap up and down with things. They go back and forth, and it's the nature of things. But it's like, yeah, I think that there are, and this is true just of like human history. Like there are eras and periods of like art history, that are like really productive. And then there are other years that are like not so productive for whatever reason, whether that be religion or whether that be like today, it's social media. Probably it's like social media, I think, is the number one killer of art in today's world. And it's like, so I mean, different things can exist. And I mean, that's something too, is like, there's just a lot of new forms of art that like, maybe I don't give the same respect that I do to like playing in bands or something or whatever, just because, again, like,
the medium.
I'm the older generation, like talking shit about the way kids are doing stuff or whatever. So I think that there probably is more than what even I realized, but I'm just like not plugged into it. So, but yeah.
Maybe slightly moving on from Cocodona, because I know this was your last year running. I'm sure you'll be involved in some capacity in the future, but you're done running it from what I can tell. Generally speaking, do things kind of lose their magic quickly for you? Like, does novelty wear off fast? Like, talk about sort of how you think about your interest in events and projects, and how you find the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would very generally, I would say yes. I think we said we were going to move on, but I think Cocodona is the only race I know that I've run multiple times like that. I don't get a lot out of like running the same races every year or doing the same thing. I'm actually surprised that I've continued to trail run for so long, to be totally honest.
Wow.
I have a lot of other interests and I have a lot of other things that I do. And so like when I leave trail running, or when I leave, at least in the way that I do it, you know, like I've agreed to be like a public figure. I've agreed to be a sponsored runner, you know what I mean? And so it's like, when you make that sort of handshake deal, you make certain, like, you have to give certain things, you know, and play the game a little bit. But like when I'm done with trail running in that aspect, it's like, it's going to be very easy for me. Like I don't have a lot of like I have a lot of other things that I wish that I did do, that I'm sort of just waiting for this trail running part of my life to be over, and I'm like excited to do other things. So it's like, and I guess I just say all of that to say, like, I am surprised that I've done it for as long as I have. But there's clearly something about it that brings me back and keeps me engaged in the sport, to the point, again, where I'm like, I clearly care about the direction of the sport and what's happening in our sport right now. And, but yeah, I mean, it's generally in anything I do, I don't like music. I have a hard time actually, like, the hardest part of making music for me is actually like the final, like, orchestration and like production of something. Like, I can sit around and play guitar for days and write 100 riffs, and like, I was like, oh, that's really fucking cool, and then just move on from it. You know what I mean? Like, I really like the creative side of making music and not so much the craft side of making music, where I'm, you know, actually creating the final product. But, or with rock climbing, like, I've never been a sport climber. I never like project something. Like, almost everything I climb, like, I climb once, and on the first, you know, it's like so it's like, it's just, I'd sort of, I like to experience as much as I can the athletic fitness side of all of these endeavors. I mean, it's like, it's a nice side product, but it's never been a motivator for me. It's like, not that there's anything wrong with like people who are motivated by being fitness. Like, it's great. I think anyone who does anything in today's world, I sort of have an admiration for. Like, the bar is pretty low, I would say. Like if you do anything in this world other than like watch the news and like talk shit about people, it's like, I have an admiration for you. So it's like, I think, yeah, movement just in general, however that makes sense to you, or however that, and I think the more you move, the more you are alive, you know. And you don't have to run 250 miles, but you know, it's like, I think just being a part of stuff like that, I think is admirable in today's world. And so, yeah.
is anything interesting to you from a race or a project standpoint in the next 6 to 18 months? Or are you like just totally satisfied and maybe at this point just thinking about?
No. I mean, I think my race, I think Saddles is like this. Saddles is really unique because it has because Saddles has so much support from Satisfy Running and from Air Viper Running, that Saddles never needs to make money. There's no real point to Saddles ever making money. Saddles sort of just exists there for myself and for Brees, the owner of Satisfy, and for Jamil to like it's almost like this like test piece. It's like, well, what could we do at races? Like, and so like we all just and this is like Jamil was texting me asking me about like Aravipa's involvement in Satisfy, and I just told him, I was like, look, my dream scenario is that this becomes mine, yours, and Brees's just sort of like pet project, where like we sit around and think about what we could do at a race for like 8 or 9 months, and then we sort of enact it and like see how that goes. And it's like just do like weird shit and like explore what it means to be a race and explore the things that you can have involved in a race. And as long as like 100 people sign up, it's like I think that's enough for like to sort of experience all of that and like experiment with things. So I mean, I think that gives me excitement to like sort of see what Saddles becomes, because I have no idea what that could become or what that could look like. And maybe that's just another 100-miler like on the but maybe it's not. Maybe some like cool shit happens.
Well, what were you testing? What were you testing last year at Saddles? Like, what was like your hypothesis about how a race should be run or what should be included, stuff like that?
I think last year was a lot of like maybe more on the marketing side. Like, can you have a race in today's world where the race director posts 2 posts on social media about it, mostly just like talking shit, like not seriously, but like just like sort of like, like I think in one of my posts I was like, this is not a qualifier for like Leadville, UTMB, or Western States. Like, I don't have a fucking qualifier, so it's like there is no qualifier. or you know what I mean? Or no, I don't even remember what I said. It was like those races can't be used as a qualifier for Saddles. And everyone was like, well, what is the qualifier then? I was like, there's not one. That was just me talking shit. It was like, so it's like, yeah. And just like the whole atmosphere around the race and just everything about it. And like, can you still have an event today, a successful event, whereas like, this is a shitty race. This is a shitty grassroots, like we don't know what we're doing. That was actually, I was actually thinking like if I ever got around to posting something for this year's race, like I was just going to say, like, just so everyone knows, like we are doing the race this year. And for those of you who are bummed about missing the inaugural year, like we guarantee this year will be just as shitty. It's like, like we've learned absolutely nothing. Like, don't worry, and it's like, so I think the whole like motto of that year was to like under promise and over deliver. I think a lot of runners who ran last year thought there were going to be like some like gels thrown in the dirt for aid stations, and it just turned out that like Jamil wanted to help out. So like I went down, like there were like real aid stations, and like they did timing for free just because he's a nice guy, and it sort of turned into a real race. But I think a shorter answer is like, like kind of what I said. Can you have a race today in today's world, have it be a successful race, but still sort of lean into that, 1970s, 1980s feel of a trail run where it's just a bunch of people like getting together and someone drawing a line in the sand with their toe and saying go, and shooting a gun and going, or whatever, like, or lighting a cigarette to, take from Laz, on that. Or it's like, and so like, can you, and I think that the answer to that is like clearly yes, you can. Like Saddles, and not saying that Saddles is on like the same sort of level as like the Wasatch or the Barclays, but I think that there are still markets in this world that sort of lean into that older way of doing things.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then on top of that, like I think, so my friend Matt and I've been working for Vacation Races in Utah for a long time, since Matt Gunn owned the races. And after Matt left and after everybody left, I sort of stayed on as this like third party trail marker or whatever. But a lot of stuff is happening at that company, and my friend Matt, not Matt Gunn, obviously, but my other friend Matt and I have decided to take over those ultra marathons for next year and have like kind of total autonomy with those races and completely change those races. And sort of it's an opportunity for me to sort of like see Matt Gunn's vision into fruition, which I think is really important to both myself and a lot of other people that knew Matt and appreciate sort of his vision. So yeah, and that's actually news. I haven't told that to anybody. Or
Wow.
so I'm effectively taking over the Zion, Bryce, and Antelope Canyon races, and I'm going
Like
up.
owning it, purchasing it.
No, it will still be for vacation races, but we're bringing back the Ultra Adventure branding, and Ultra Adventures will exist sort of as this like autonomous branch of vacation races. And a lot of that has to do with just like me working out things with the owner of vacation races, and just both of us coming to understandings about what all this means. And I do think that he's done some things in the past that he's learned from, and he doesn't want to do those things anymore. And he also, I mean, to be fair, even after Matt passed, he was the only one at the company that was really trying to like keep Matt's stuff alive. And I think him hiring me to take over the races is a clear example that he also shares those values a little bit. So, you know, it'll be a bit of an experiment. I mean, I know him very well, so I mean, there's that. So, yeah, I mean, we're excited about it to sort of change the direction of those races, and like I said, bring back maybe some of the older races that Matt had. And because the idea of those races were to sort of step up the grand staircase throughout the year, is like they progress. They progress from early on in the year, and you're going like Monument Valley to Antelope Canyon, like up to the Grand Canyon, to Zion, to Bryce, like blah, you know, Capitol Reef. You're going up to the Tushers, like Bryce Canyon, and so it's like you're climbing the grand staircase throughout the year. And that was sort of Matt's vision with a lot of those races. And yeah, and just turning them back to the So well, I mean, we'll see how that goes. Like, I don't know if it'll be successful. I think it will be, because I wouldn't have agreed to it unless there was a lot of communication and conversations that have taken place. But that's going to be actually, it's going to be the closest thing I've ever had to a job, to be totally honest. And
you're in your race director era.
Yeah, stereotypically the aging ultra runner. It's actually my goal with those races is to get them back to what we all envision that they could be and should be. I think both a vision that like Matt Gunn and I shared together. Like before Matt passed, you know, we were all working on like a stage race through the grand staircase, and it's like we have certain visions for things. And again, like I said earlier, this is my opportunity to turn some of his races into that. And but I think best case scenario is the other Matt who's coming on as co-director with me. I sort of just want to exist in this co-director role for as long as I can get those races to that point, and any new races that we create will also share that value. And I would really love for the new Matt to take over in a year or two as full-time director of those races, and I sort of step back to just being the dirty trail marker again, because that's what I like to do. So
through your efforts, Matt's efforts, is it likely that we'll see another great Southwest located multi-day event in the next couple of years? Like you mentioned, this stage race possibly. Like, could we see like a Cocodona 2.0 in Southeast Utah or Northeast Arizona?
you could. I think the 200-mile distance for races feels like a lot. 200 plus miles. So I think I can't never say never. I can say that there's no real plan unless I have a conversation with Steve Alderholt, about bringing mats. So like Steve was involved in that stage race planning as well. I think now with like,
that's not the Grand to Grand, is it?
No.
Okay.
No, this was totally separate. Matt had just barely opened registration before he passed, and he wasn't even taking money from people at that point. It was just like a sign up thing. But it was it was something totally different. But it was actually at Matt's memorial run. Steve put on a segment of that where a bunch of people came out and ran like a segment of what that race was going to be. So, I mean, I could see some conversations there happening with Steve and some other people about whether or not we wanted to bring something like that back, or not even bring it back, just actually do it. There's just a fucking lot right now, man. And it's like, there's just a lot going on. So, and then, I mean, my relationship with Satisfy, I mean, I think I have the greatest deal in ultra running, and I can't say enough positive things about them, both as a company and as people. Like, I just love all of them so much, and I feel like the luckiest guy alive to be able to be in the situation that I am with them. And so I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with them and the projects that we'll get into. But I'm going to continue to be with them for as long as they'll have me, which I think they like me too. So it's like, I think there will always be projects. There will always be things. As far as like competitively racing, like, I really do think that the 200 plus mile distance is the only distance I can compete in these days anyways. So it's like I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of those either. So it's like, I don't know about competitively running, but there will always be cool projects that I'll continue to do with Satisfy. And the daughter's like 11 months old. So once she gets a little older, we'll start doing some more stuff too. But
and this is just me being interested in tracking trends and subcultures and movements, but like you very clearly represent like sort of the anti-corporate pro athlete image. And then on this race directing front, whether or not it's intended, like Saddles to me represents like the zag to the zig of what's going on with UTMB and the Golden Ticket Series. And so I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts there, but I'll just be curious to see, not that one is going to win or lose, but I'll be curious to see how much traction in the community your version of ultra running gets, because like I don't know, to me, it's just that's going to be one of the exciting, I don't even want to call it a cultural battle, but like I'll be curious to see where things are in 2030, in that regard.
I do think that like Golden Series UTMB thing, I think all of that, this whole image that ultra running has on like a large scale image, and you obviously would probably know about this better than I would, but it's like, I think that's actually the minority. You know what I mean? I think even people running these like even like these super hyper competitive events like Black Canyon or like UTMB or something, the reality is that there's only like 3 to 5% of those runners out there think they can be competitive. Sure. Like the other 95% of the runners aren't out there trying to beat anybody, or they're not out there. Like maybe they're trying to like get top 10 or top 20 or whatever it is. Like those are some goals people have. But I think the majority of people who ultra run or trail run are out there for the experience, and are out there for like the growth that they could achieve from that, and the mental side of running, the psychological side, the mental health side, like all those other things, all those other reasons that people run. The competitive side is only a part of a very small percentage of ultra runners. But publicly, the perception is that like that is the entire sport, that the hyper competitive people, the sponsored athletes, and the reality is that it's because The only reason why any of that exists is because these companies have identified that the market of trail running is now big enough that they can pour money into sponsoring athletes, the social media program, the marketing departments, like blah, 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 like, and turn yet another one of our outdoor activities into a marketing campaign and a consumer market. But that's not the reality of most ultra runners. I think most of us are out there not because, like, you know, because of the clothes or the shoes or because of whatever. We're all out there for the experience. And I think that trail running, I think what I love so much about it is the fact that you really don't need anything. You don't need to go buy anything to go trail run. Like, go to the thrift store and get a pair of shoes and a pair of shorts, and you have everything you need to go, like, experience that activity. And I think the fact that these companies like Hoka and Solomon and some of these other bigger companies have been able to turn trail running into a consumer market, I think is an impressive marketing, like, scheme. But I also think it fucking sucks. So, like, it's like, I don't like, and that's been a big thing about, like, sponsorships at saddles, or like sponsorships for the races in Utah. Now we've already cut out every corporate sponsor at the vacation races because, like, we don't want them around and we don't want their shitty vibes. Like, we don't want people showing up to our races thinking that this is just an opportunity for these brands to push product on them. Or we don't want runners to feel like they're coming around simply because we're trying to sell them a product. Like, these are not ad campaigns. These are not like come out for the experience and, like, fucking experience the run in the community as much as you can. And again, the fact that these bigger companies have been able to convince people that, like, I don't want to call anybody out personally, so I'm not going to, but that some of these professional athletes, like, are trail running. It's like, it's bullshit. Like, we're all trail running. The non-sponsored athletes are trail running. The people who are like buying shit at thrift stores and going out and running and getting an experience, and, like, those are trail runners, and, like, that's the community. And I think and you brought up, like, the whole, like, counterculture thing a lot, and to, like, kind of segue back into that conversation, like I don't think I'm the counterculture. I think I am the culture. I think those other hyper competitive sponsored athletes, they're the fucking counterculture. All the D1 college athletes coming out and trying to, like, crush these fucking record times, that's the counterculture. Like, I am, like, people like me, non-competitive, like, I guess, like, I don't even think I'm a good representation. Like, I'm a sponsored runner, like, I am what I fucking hate. But it's like
what I hate.
It's like, I think all that other stuff that exists in trail running, like, that's trail running. So, like, you can dress up the top 10 or whatever, and you can do all this stuff to try and sell shoes to people, or to try and do whatever, like, you want to as a CEO of these big companies, because you've identified that there's a big enough trail running market that you can now extract from instead of actually support. Like, that's why we're doing away with the corporate sponsors at the races in Utah, because, like, you can still sponsor our event, but the only way you can sponsor our event is you have to come.
Yeah.
You can't send me a few boxes of, like, back orders that you can't sell and expect me to, like, hang your banner everywhere and, like, give you a bunch of, like, content. Like, the only way you can sponsor our events, and is, like, not to, like, toot my own horn here, but, like, with Satisfy Running at Cocodona, they come from France, spend, like, tens of thousands of dollars, and, like, build this big aid station at Cocodona and try and provide the runners with whether you like it or not, it's a different experience. And they're at least coming and supporting the event. All these sponsors, like, just like, here's some money, like, do a bunch of marketing for us. Like, fuck that. Like, not interested. Like, if you want to sponsor any of our events, you have to come, you have to send people, and you have to actually support the event and be a part of the community. If you're not willing to do that, then, like, fuck off. Like, go sponsor Western States or something. I don't know.
And but for the record, and none of what I'm going to ask you is gotcha, and my opinions are fairly fluid. But I have a hard time believing, and I can totally see this on like Wall Street for like if you're working for like a private equity firm, or like if you're like a bond trader. I totally get that. Like, you are well aware that sort of like your existence in the economy is less about value creation and service and more like extractive. But I have a hard time believing that somebody applies to a company like Hoka or UTMB and then like wakes up every day being like, can't wait to extract value. Like, I have to imagine that those jobs at those companies are so like, no one's making it totally rich, right? Like, even like, I just have a hard time believing that like their mode of operation is extraction. I could be wrong. Again, like I don't know the financials or the inside baseball. You have more experience being on the ground.
No, I think sometimes. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think sometimes I just like pick on them because like, they're like it's like low hanging fruit a little bit, and it's like, but I do think like, I mean, anytime I can like sort of pick on Hoka, I do, because I think that they're like the main sponsor of like the whole everything that's going on with like the UTMB thing and like Ironman getting into our sport and like all of those controversies, which we don't need to talk about here. But so I think too, just like seeing like, I was in the sport when they were a new brand, so it's like seeing what they've become is like funny to me, and it's just like, so I think it's clear I'm not like picking on the individuals either, but I do think that like there are a lot of these bigger companies have, there are certainly people that work for them that have like good motives and they do really great things, and I think that even those companies sometimes can do really great things. But I also think that like I ran Kodiak last year, which I'm not really sure why, and
I think it's a cool course, that loop around that lake at high elevation. I mean, that's sick.
So it's why, I mean, I think it's why it was always on my radar as like a course that I wanted to run. And it's like running through those aid stations. It's like how are your aid stations worse than the aid stations I had at Saddles?
Yeah.
But there's 500 huge Hoka lights like going up all the ski resorts, and there's like Hoka banners everywhere, and you're like spending 6 figures on like Hoka advertise. I'm making shit up now, you know what I mean? But it's like it just seems like there's a lot more going into the production of the marketing and the ads than there is actually going into helping the runners or having good aid stations or like having a good course. And it's like, I think that races need to kind of get away from that. I think like this idea that I think a big push there is to,
and that's where I agree with you though. I agree with you there because, and I don't mean to interrupt, but like I totally believe in like the hippy dippy energy field type stuff, and you can totally tell when a race has been built and operated from a position of love versus like just going through the motions and like, I hate my job, but like my job is to mark the course today or to set up an aid station. You can totally tell when somebody has like phoned it in versus like they cannot wait to do all of like the minuscule and like setting up the porta potties because they just love the race and what it stands for. Like I totally buy that. And so to me, when I think about what makes like a race like Saddles more vibrant and like community driven than maybe one of these UTMB races, is that undeniably everything that has been built at Saddles comes from a position of love. Whereas maybe in the case of Kodiak, one of the employees on the ground like doesn't really like their job, doesn't want to be there. And so like things kind of fall apart from that standpoint, but it's less extractive in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I think too, a lot of times like I take on the position of like, of needing to be the extremist, like in the other direction. You know what I mean? So like to push back on all of that as much as I can, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one doing it. Even though like clearly I'm not. I feel like sometimes maybe I'm the only one publicly doing it. And it's like, which also isn't true. But like, yeah, so like everything I say, you know what I mean? Like everything I say is like, I don't even like, I like to say sometimes like, I have a lot of like values and opinions and I don't believe in any of them. So, it's like,
I'll go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's just like sometimes like if I'm picking on a company like Hoka, like what I'm actually picking on is like the worst case scenario and using them because they're an easy one to pick on. Or it's like, yeah, what's awesome is that like, a big reason of why I continue to come back to the sport and like still be involved in it is because like I get along with more people in the trail running community than I do in any other community. So it's like when I'm out there running Cocodona is like, I'm probably the most talkative I ever am in my entire life while I'm out running, if there are like other runners around, because it's like, it's just like a bunch of people you kind of get along with, which like you drop me into any other setting in this world, it's not the case, you know? So it's like, I actually really do like most people in trail running. I just, again, it's going back to the same thing we've been talking about, is like, as I get older, I'm just getting less tolerant of things. And when I see races turning into like these big, like, it just feels like it's more about the product that they can sell versus the experience. It's like I have a hard time like not calling that out and like not saying something about it. I mean, even like like I'm good friends with Jamil. It's like I've been friends with Jamil for a long time, and I've been involved with Aravaipa for a long time. Like I don't love what's happened to Black Canyon City, you know. It's, or like the Black, like it just like and that's like, that's such a small, there's so much worse things. It's like it's just me being like really nitpicky and idealistic, you know what I mean? And so it's like almost everything I say or do is like you know, I like everyone else alive am absolutely a hypocrite. Like I think everyone alive is a hypocrite. I think this idea that we're all like living these like perfect ideal versions of ourselves is not true. I mean, I think that we all have that sort of ideal version of ourselves that we aspire to be, and we all falter in being that, and where we falter is how we're all hypocrites. And I think that that's totally fine. I think the goal is to try and like minimize that as much as possible. But like, yeah, I'm a huge hypocrite with things. Like I talk about things all the time and I don't fulfill. Like I ran Kodiak last year. It's just a UTMB race. It's like, how can I fucking sit here and say, you know? And it's like like I'm going to UTMB next year because Satisfy wants to put up a fucking tent, and it's like, okay, you know. So it's like, I think it's all like innocent conversations, but I do think that like, because there are extremists pushing in the other way, I feel the need to push back a little bit. And I mean, I think that's good. Why, like, I just feel like Saddles just needs to exist just for the sake of that. You know what I mean? Like there just needs to be, I'm not saying that there aren't other races that also exemplify that, but just knowing that Saddles will always exist as this, like, we are the extremist on this side of the spectrum. It's like, that just needs to exist just for the sake of it, you know? It's like
100%. And I hope you know that I deeply appreciate like that role of being a check and balance on anything that you perceive as either off or wrong. And I'll be the first to admit too that I've on more than one occasion been a hypocrite, and it's also super easy for me to sit on this side of the mic lobbing questions and comments and what ifs at you. So
no, I think for me too, it's like, it's always important to realize that it's just like trail running. It doesn't fucking matter, or it's like, we're all just like running around, like. And so I mean, I do think a common theme with me my whole life is like, I've like always harped on like sort of like extreme consumerism and turning everything into products and just buying things for the sake of buying things. And I think that, you know, when I see that world again, similar to like the David Goggins mentality or like the hyper like consumerism aspect of trail running creeping into my sport, like I kind of react, and I'm like, fuck, stop. Like even though I have no fucking, you know, sway over anything, like yeah, Solomon's not gonna like, anyways, stop picking on brands.
Last question on this topic, I promise. And I guess it's more a comment first, because you and I are both basketball fans. You probably hate me for this, but I'm a big Jazz fan. So I'll go to a couple games a year, always go to whatever it's called, the Vivint Smart Home Arena. And like, I see that logo, I see all the branding around the stadium. My reaction is always like, like whatever. And like, I go watch the game, and I can still enjoy the NBA and the hyper professionalism of it, and like find time to, you know, go to like a local YMCA club and play pickup or whatever, and whatever, you know what I mean? But then like in my home sport of trail running, you and I can sort of have this dispute about like the validity of like Hoka pylons being on the course and that totally ruining the vibe and threatening the sport. Like, what are your thoughts there? Because again, you and I both love the NBA, and I don't feel like either of us see the existence of the NBA hurting like the grassroots pickup style that happens, in your local hometown.
But I do think me being into the NBA is an example of how I'm kind of a hypocrite. Because I mean, maybe hypocrite's too strong of a word, but like being into professional sports doesn't really like go in line with everything else that I'm talking about. But it's actually an interesting question, and it was because yesterday I was driving home from Bryce Canyon, and I have to drop my friends off that I hire in Vegas for their flights back, and I drove past the Raiders stadium.
Oh yeah.
And they had like on the big screen right on the interstate, they had like a picture of their quarterback from like in the 1970s or whatever. They were just like showing pictures and stuff, and it's like, I was like, what about the current Raiders is, and this is true of any team that moves locations, right? Like, what makes a team a team? And the reality is that like the marketing and the brand is all that is. I mean, even ownerships change, you know what I mean? So like, or it's like, to bring up the Phoenix Suns, because I'm a big Phoenix Sun, or I've been since a Suns fan my entire life. Like the Suns went to the finals 2 years ago, and then after that year, they traded every single player except for Devin Booker, and like had a new coach and had like everything. And it's like, it was almost like Devin Booker got traded to a new team, but they're like in the same spot. And so it's like, what makes a team, and why are we fans of these teams, especially if they move locations? Like, how is anyone in Las Vegas proud of the history of the Raiders? You know what I mean? Or like, and so I think, what's interesting is that like all that it is like I said, the only thing that makes a team is the brand, and is the marketing, and is the logo, and is the like Phoenix Suns pillow that I have, somewhere. It's like, and like, why do we continue to be fans of it? Like, especially in the cases if that team moves. I don't know. It's like, it's an interesting, it's just an interesting, I don't know if this will make your cutting room floor or whatever, but it's like,
well, it's an incredibly, as someone who is a sports fan and that doesn't think as critically about all of that, it's incredibly destabilizing to now entertain that. So might have ruined my jazz fandom.
Well, I mean, the Jazz are from New Orleans, right? But I mean, no, when I was thinking about it, like sometimes besides the branding, sometimes it's the owner, right? The owners will own this team for like 40 years, or the owner's family. Like the Lakers have been owned by the same family for however long.
Boss family,
like, yeah. And it's like, so like, even if the Lakers move, well, obviously the Lakers aren't going to move, but even if they moved somewhere else, like that would still be owned by them. So besides the marketing and branding, we're just fans of these like hyper wealthy, like fucking family. Is that what I'm a fan of? Like why am I staying loyal to any of it? Because it's just, I don't know. So anyways,
do you have
not saying you shouldn't be a Jazz fan, or I shouldn't be a Suns fan. I mean, I shouldn't be a Suns fan because they're fucking toxic and shitty. But like, yeah, I mean, there's something there, and that's like, brands and symbols and all of those things, and then like that does matter in human psyche. So it's like, again, I'm a sponsored runner, so I'm the biggest hypocrite out there. It's like, I like, given that's not like a traditional setup, but it's like, I associate with my brand, and it's like, and that's a big part of like what Brees and Satisfy talk about, like with their whole culture and what like they're trying to develop, is like, because they similar were like part of like punk rock things growing up, and it's like, as a human being, you latch onto these brands or onto these symbols because it identifies that like you are a part of this, or in a lot of cases with like counterculture things, it's like you're saying I am not part of this, and it's expressing and communicating that like you don't share these values, and you think that these values are detrimental to whatever. And I mean, maybe not with like sports, but we're still like, when you wear a jersey of like a sports team, you're saying that like I am a part of this community, and like we have shared values, at least in this moment and in this time, like what we're all like sitting here watching a Jazz game. And I think that those things are important for people, like people finding communities. It's like I said earlier, it's like when I meet people that I like, I sort of latch onto. And a lot of times, like I remember last time I was in Paris, Brice, the owner of Satisfy, was getting me to go running with some of his friends. And it's like friends that I had never met, friends that I didn't know. I just had their phone number. We were just texting to like meet up, and we'd meet up in these public places. And I'd run right over to him because every fucking guy who wears Satisfy looks exactly the same. You know what I mean? It's like we're all like clear, like they're all like covered in tattoos, and it's all like counter. You know, it's like I didn't have to ask like what he looked like or where he was. I just like saw him, and I was like, oh, there's Ian. Like, let's go running. You know what I mean? So it's like those things do provide opportunities for us to like, you know, come together as a community and do all of this. And I think all of that too. I mean, like with trail running, when you're out like on a trail in your local community and you see somebody wearing like a vest, it's like, oh, you're like a trail runner, like you're an ultra runner, right? That's how you're identifying. Or that's what you're putting. Those are the feathers that you're putting out there to like be a part of this community. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And yeah, and maybe that's hypocritical of me to say after all the other shit I've talked. But
well, and again, maybe this is, I don't know if it's a stereotype, but one of the vibes I've always gotten is that if you're involved in the counterculture to some extent, you almost want to defy labels. And I do think it's actually cool in this day of age to take ownership in some sort of group identity or a brand. So like in my experience or with my perspective, I take no issue with somebody being super hyped about Adidas or Nike or La Sportiva or Satisfy. What I care most about is like, can you really tell that they are passionate about it and they take ownership in it and like they live sort of the ethos and the values?
Yeah, I mean that's the most important thing. Like I can talk about all these like esoteric philosophical ideals of like branding in the sport, but like the idea of me like not expressing like respect or kindness to somebody because they're in like a Solomon shoes or something, or like that's fucking insane, right? I generally like most people that I meet in trail running, and it has nothing to do with what they're wearing or what they're. And I think that is more in line with like what I'm like trying to get across, is that like all this entire community, this entire world of trail running is about those better things. It's about the kindness in the I mean, it's why we run races, right? Because of the community. It's like there's literally no other point to running a race besides like maybe some support to like get something done that you want to get done, which you could set that support up on your own. Really the biggest thing is the community to like run these things on the same day as everybody else. And so it's like, as long as I think everyone's like being awesome to each other, then the sport is fine. And the sport is fine. Like the sport's fine. It's just like curmudgeons like me sitting back and like identifying ways that it can like should be or it sure shouldn't be. And it's like, which I think is important to have that a little bit, you know, to sort of like keep some things in check. But like as long as we're all just like running and like having good experiences, then who cares about anything else, you know?
Outside of the people at Satisfy, are there any other people in the community that you would identify as, I don't want to say ally because that kind of sounds like a cringe term, but just people who see the sport the same way you do and want to act as like a check and balance on certain trends? Like, are there people that you're like, I don't even know if colleague is the right word, but you know where I'm going with this? Like, who do you talk with the most that has a similar level of influence, maybe? That
I like the smaller brands, you know, like I mean, I can say on an individual level, there's like everyone.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I don't hold any individual accountable for anything. It's like I just think that they're trends, and when none of us have real control over trends, it's like they sort of just move and exist in this weird ethos above everything. But it's like, or like culture, we don't really control that. But like, so like, I mean, again, it's why I said I still run races, because most people I meet at races are awesome. You know, it's very rare that we get the like guy yelling at aid station workers in our sport. You know what I mean? It's like almost like 99% of people who exist at these races and do these things, they're all awesome.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why we continue to be a part of this community, because it like the shitheads get weeded out pretty fast. And it's like there's no tolerance for that, right? Like there's no tolerance for, again, to use the example of like the guy yelling at aid station volunteers.
Yeah.
So it's like, on a brand level, like I just like, clearly I'm a guy that like supports smaller brands and like smaller brands doing cooler things. Like I think J&G is a really cool brand. I think the people that they support and the stuff that they're doing, like I really respect. I think that there's a lot of brands like that are, I think even the bigger brands do cool stuff, you know, at times. Like these bigger brands don't exist in the same way that like I am a hypocrite and I just like try and be the best version of myself that I can. I think brands can exist like that too. Like there are a lot of different aspects of brands and a lot of different people working for brands. So it's like, I mean, Satisfy's doing, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Never mind. No, they did. It came out. Satisfy did a collaboration with Hoka, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like there are mutual, and that wasn't me. Like obviously I'm not Satisfied, but like, it's like there's a lot of overlap that can happen and there's a lot of cool things. And there's like, so I don't like, yeah, I guess just to say like most of the sport and most of the things brands do, I support and I respect and I think is like really awesome. It's just the extractive elements that I see, which I don't really like. Like I think sometimes you can tell when things are like done by like the marketing department of companies or if they're done by like actual trail runners, you know. And it's like,
Yeah.
I think that it's good to recognize those things. And I mean, because it can get shitty, you know what I mean? And I think Ironman and the whole thing that happened with Gary and all of that, I think getting exposed was obviously, you know, sucks for Gary and it sucks for all the people involved in that company up there. But I think that like there are shitty things that can happen when we start leaning into this hyper, and this is between, like we talked a lot about the hyper competitiveness between runners and athletes, but that also exists between brands. And I think that stuff like what happened to Gary can happen is when you get a bunch of people who are only in the sport because they're trying to make as much money as they possibly can have detrimental effects to local trail running scenes. Yeah. And I think Gary's example going as public as it did, I'm hoping that like long term can be good for the sport, because I mean, people tend to generally forget about that stuff pretty fast, you know, and move on from it. But
we're still talking about it in May.
Yeah, or at least I am, right? It's like, but it's like I do think having such a public example of where that type of mentality and branding and these bigger brands moving into our sport can have serious consequences and can have detrimental effects to, like, you know, in the same way like REI just moved into my town, and it's like Prescott is known for its like local outdoor shops and like bike shops, and it's like, it's the model. It's like REI moves in, they spread the market thin enough to where the smaller shops can't withstand it, but a big, huge thing like REI can. They put everyone out of business, and then now they're the only player in the game. It's like it's the oldest model there is in like American corporate economics, and it's like, so just resisting that, you know, resisting Ironman coming in and pushing out local trail running scenes. And it's why I like Jamil so much. It's why I like Aravaipa so much, because Jamil is now big enough and Aravaipa is now big enough that they can resist companies like UTMB. And when UTMB tries to come in and buy Black Canyon and buy Javelina and Jamil says no, like Aravaipa is too big for UTMB to push out, or, you know. And so it's like, there are serious consequences to brands getting too big and existing for the sole purpose of extraction and making hundreds of millions of dollars. It's like, now I know that that's not the case in like most communities. Like most communities are like, or with most brands even, you know what I mean? Like, but I do think it's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And it's something that exists in almost every other sport. That has happened in almost every other outdoor sport. Like, why the fuck is Adidas one of the biggest like rock climbing sponsors? Why is Nike one of the biggest skateboarding sponsors? It's like these brands have moved in and taken over, and it's like these are cautionary tales that we can either choose to listen to or not with our precious trail running, because we're at that crossroads, you know.
I think you mentioned Jamil. I think Jamil is one of the best examples of somebody who threads the needle perfectly in his core sport. Like, actually, preparing for this interview, I rewatched his interview that he did with you post Arizona Trail, and he lets you riff on like Jonathan Livingston Seagull for like 10 minutes. You know?
Yeah. No, I've always talked about Jamil about he's one of the most interesting people I know in the sport, because he has his foot in every pot. Like, he understands and sympathizes with every point of view. With like, I mean, he's a big reason why I have a career in ultra running. And on the flip side of that, he also loves UTMB and like European races and these, like, that was like, I mean, that's like publicly his goal with Cocodona, was to turn it into this like bigger
American
equivalent of like these European races, you know what I mean? So it's like, or like Black Canyon City or Javelina, like he has some of these like biggest ultras out there. So it's like, I think he's just so interesting, and how he's, like, you, to use your parlance, to like thread the needle of all of these different aspects of the sport. I don't know. I think he's a really good person to be in the position that he is and have the influence that he does. And I feel thankful for people like him in our sport that are able to sort of like see all those points of view. And I can spew shit at him like this all night, and he sort of receives that and sympathizes with all of it, and even agrees with it, a lot of it, to a certain point. And but he's able to absorb that and like sort of, I think it's why like he loves supporting saddles, and why he loves supporting a lot of other races. Like, Aravaipa supports a lot of races that you don't really know, just because they want to see things succeed. And I think it's important like that, to have people like, he's a highly influential person in our community because of everything that he does. So yeah, I think better him than some other people.
I know we're way over time. Do you mind if I ask you like 2 or 3 more questions tops?
I don't care at all. I actually, so I meant to say to you at the beginning of this, if I take the time to like sit down and talk to somebody, like, I'm a lot better at the long form stuff.
Okay.
Anyways, because like, if we're gonna talk about things, I don't want to just like get superficial about them and move on.
Oh yeah.
Like, let's talk about it, you know? So
yeah, I just wanted to respect your time. I'm having a ton of fun.
yeah, me too.
All right. I wrote a quote down here, and it was from an interview that you did with Satisfy maybe 3 years ago. And I have a lot of questions off of it. You say, building is one of the most creative things you can do. Just because most builders are boring as fuck doesn't mean you can't do cool shit with building. Yeah. My first question, are builders boring as fuck?
Well, I mean, I think most like, okay, so like, generally speaking, like most people who work in construction that you know are like, they work on like track homes, you know what I mean? Like that's like what most building is, just building track homes. You're just building the same thing over and over and over again. And I don't think the majority of construction workers go to work every day feeling like super stoked because they have this like canvas of creativity that they can lay into for like the rest of the day. And again, I'm not just speaking out of term here. Like, I've worked in construction for a long, you know what I mean? And it's like, so I think, and I think that quote was definitely, just in general, a pretty like blanketed metaphor for things. You know what I mean? I think the way that most people do things in general, like, and I think
because you're a builder, like, you're clearly a builder. You're not boring.
No, and I mean, I think like when I build things, like, so I've been a pretty spoiled builder my entire life because I've gotten to like pick and choose things I work on. And like, you know, so I've built tree houses. I built this house in Spain out of like trees. There's actually pictures of it on my Instagram, like way back. It's like this really crazy
Oh
house
yeah, you're
that's
like
like
it'll never be done. Like you're building it,
yeah,
it'll never be
like
done.
that house. Like that house is fucking insane. Like uh and or like, you know, a few years ago I built a couple tiny houses and like sold those. So it's like I generally build pretty creative things, and it's because that's my motivation. My motivation with building is to not just like pump units out and sell them. Again, it's like I've avoided using this word up until now, but I think I have to. It's like I'm not motivated by like capitalistic ideals, and so
Yeah.
it's like when I build things, I'm not motivated by the amount of money that I can get in return for selling that. Or when I start a race, I'm not motivated by the amount of money that I can make from registrations, or you know what I mean. So it's like, and without getting in to me like talking shit about that, I can just leave it like that. Like I personally am not motivated by those things, and I realize that that's an extremely like privileged position to be in, but it's also just the truth. Like it's just on my day-to-day level, I'm not super motivated by things that like I can make a bunch of money at. So like, and I think that when your motivation is money, I think you get into building the same house 10 times in a row and a really boring, uncreative lifestyle. And
Hmm.
so when races are motivated by money, I think they turn into these big things that like aren't great. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of thought that went into them. There's not a lot of community that goes into them. Like there's like, why doesn't every race have a fucking kids race on a Friday night, the night before, where like parents can pelt their kids with water balloons as they're crossing the finish line? You know what I mean? It's like, that was just an example Matt and I were
Hey, that
talking
could be
about.
saddles
It's
this
like,
year.
yeah, no, it's like, so it's like, um, yeah, I think anything you do can be an incredibly creative enterprise. I think, um, and then there are a lot of people who choose to do things just sort of the more general way of doing it, like the more successful. Like I think music is a really good example. Like if you're going to be a musician and write like really, really creative like music, probably not going to be that successful. Like just generally speaking, you're probably like, but if you lean into writing more like commercially successful pop music, like you're probably going to be more successful and you're going to make more money. But like that doesn't necessarily mean that, again, huge generalities here. Just saying in general, like, um, so yeah, whether that's literally building something, and I've actually like, I think I think after that interview, like Brees actually like sort of inherited a little bit of that, like with his own brand. You know what I mean? Of like, how can we be different as a brand? Like there's a model for how brands exist and how you build certain brands and how you get big enough, and then you eventually like move to mass market and you like do all these other things. And it's like, how can satisfy like defy that in today's world and still be successful and still be like a brand that exists? But how do we do that differently, or how do we do this differently at Saddles? Like there's the model. I mean, even with like things like belt buckles, you know, like what, like I don't have to give a fucking belt buckle at Saddles if I don't want to. Like that's just a thing they started doing. I do give belt buckles at Saddles, but it's like just an example of like, that's a really small example of like, we don't have to do anything. It's like we can
Yeah.
do anything that we want, and even though the race format doesn't feel like the most creative of like enterprises, I think that there are things to explore there. You know?
I think it's really admirable that you have, at least from what I can tell, you've organized your life to not be beholden. Like I learned that you've like never paid rent for 10 years. Like you bought land and kind of slowly built up an existence on that land. Like very, like I know you say privilege, which privilege is relative, but like you've done a pretty good job at not having to compromise on a lot of stuff, which is cool.
Yeah, which I feel really lucky, but it's like yeah, it's like I've refused my entire life to pay rent to somebody, because I think like interest-seeking, rent-receiving landlords should be illegal because I'm super idealistic. And like, so like, again, that's just like this extreme personal opinion that I have. Like rich people that own a bunch of houses shouldn't be charging poor people to live there. Like just in like without getting into any of the other stuff. That's just like how I feel. So
Sure.
like, so because of that, I've created this like super idealistic persona where like I would rather sleep in my truck on this like cheap land that I bought and learn how to build shit over the course of 12 years and build a bunch of shitty things out on my land that were illegal that eventually I had to tear down because the county made me tear them all down. But it's like I spent 12 years of my life learning how to build shit. And now I can do it well. And so like now I can build a tiny house and sell it. And now I have money. And it's like, so it's like, not that that was like the motivation for that, but it was still like, so I've been able to stay really idealistic, and I think that is privilege. Like, but I also think I've worked hard at not a lot of people are going to live without electricity for like I didn't have power for like 8 years.
Yeah.
You know, like I hauled my own water and like, which you get used to it pretty fast, but like, but I also like I clearly have electricity now, and it's like I have like all this stuff, and it's like, I actually think I'm like to most people I'm still like probably poor, but I also like I'm one of the only friends that I know that own a house in our generation. You know what I mean? Like I have a house. I bought a house, like, which is insane. Like I've never had a job. You know what I mean? And so it's like I think a lot of it is like I don't want to like I have worked hard and I have done all those things, but I've also been really lucky, and I do think I'm privileged. Whether that's like no one's ever like given me anything, but I do think that I'm just like an intelligent white guy, and like shit comes easy, you know. So
For
it's
sure.
like, so yeah, it's like, and that's actually a big part of me continuing to be a trail runner and continuing to like have an association with Satisfy, or continuing to do a lot of the things that I do is like I have these opportunities that are in front of me that a lot of people wish they had, and like a lot of people strive for, and to not take advantage of those opportunities feels like a waste. And so like, I mean, even on the like, you know, it's like how I said earlier, I think I have the best deal in ultra running when it comes for what I'm expected to do, which is absolutely nothing for Satisfy. I always talk about how I'm the only sponsored athlete in the world that doesn't have social media obligations. And I actually found out that that's bullshit because Arlen, for completely different reasons, also doesn't have social media obligations.
He's got a great deal.
Yeah, he's got a great deal. But so like it's just continuing my involvement with Satisfying, continuing to be a part of all of that, and like, or just the home that I live. Like I'm able to, like, my wife and I are both stay-at-home parents in a house that we don't pay rent in. It's like, how the fuck did that happen? Like in today's world when so many people are struggling to like buy the shittiest house that they can afford. And it's like, it's why I'm so hard on landlords. It's why I refuse to pay rent. It's like one human being should not own 40 houses. You know, it's like,
Sounds like
anyways.
that playbook should go into a book. It's like maybe, you know, you wrote that guidebook on Grand Staircase. Maybe write a guidebook on not paying rent, like the playbook for it.
But again, I just think I think I'm just lucky. I think I got really lucky. I'm one of the few people. And so like, I'm not one of these fucking assholes that talks about how like, you know, the bootstraps guy, you know what I mean? I think I got really lucky. I bought land for $20,000 and I sold it for more than that. And I sold 2 tiny houses.
Yeah.
And I was able to buy this piece of shit house, which I've been rebuilding for the last 2 years. So it's like, it's not like I don't work hard. Like I work hard for it. And it's like, you know, the house still isn't done. It's like my wife's bathroom isn't done. The staircase is just plywood. I have like a baby crawling up plywood stairs in the house, and it's like, I mean, like 80% of it's done, so it's fine. But it's like,
do you still have the 68 Dodge A100?
I don't. No, I sold it.
Really?
Yeah, I wish
Why?
I didn't do that because there was at
Why?
a time in my life when I didn't have any money and I needed some money.
Gotcha.
And
the one time you're beholden.
Yeah, and it was just like I couldn't take it anywhere, man. Like,
I was just watching one of your AZT. I think you were using that van at the time of the AZT, right? Because there were some cool shots that Jamil got of like the inside of it and whatnot. It was sweet.
I think that might have been the Whiskey Man movie.
Oh, the Whiskey Man. Okay.
But
it was like a deadhead. It was like a deadhead van.
Yeah. So the guy I bought it from had owned it for like 50 years. And I remember when he sold it to me, he came out to my place that's also in the Whiskey Man movie, and like we hung out in that van for like 3 days. And I don't smoke pot, which I know is surprising to everybody, but like I've never smoked pot. Well, that's not true. When I was younger I did, but I don't. But like he just had to I played guitar and he's like played harmonica, so like he had to come out to the land and stayed out there for like 3 days. This like 85-year-old guy, like on my property, like sitting in his van, just like smoking and like drinking and like playing music for like days. And then when it was finally like over, he sold me the van. It was like, that was it. But yeah, like, sorry, just the guy who had it before me like had all the decorations in there and everything were because of him. Yeah.
That might surprise some people that you don't touch marijuana, but you are very familiar with psychedelics, especially psilocybin.
Yeah. Yeah, pot to me is way crazier than psilocybin. Like just the way it affects me. It's yeah, psilocybin, that's I think it's funny. I mean psilocybin can obviously be insane, but like also if you drink an entire bottle of whiskey, like that's going to be pretty fucking insane. So it's like, I mean, that's one thing. So like I have a bunch of chemistry degrees. I actually used to teach chemistry at community college in Prescott, and you learn pretty quickly in chemistry, like there's like a famous axiom about chemistry. I'm going to get it wrong exactly how it goes, but essentially it's like nothing in this world is poisonous or not poisonous. Or like nothing in this world is good for you or bad for you. It's just a matter of dosage. And so like even something like smoking cigarettes, like I don't think tobacco is bad for you. I think smoking a pack a day is bad for you. You know what I mean? I don't think alcohol is bad for you. I think like drinking a 12-pack of beer is bad for you. Microdosing psilocybin is like the tamest fucking thing you could ever experience. Doing an entire like Ziploc bag full of mushrooms is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just whatever relationship you have with that. And but for me, what I can say with pot, it doesn't seem like the dose matters at this point. Like I feel like if I even like with pot, I actually got made fun of the other day for calling it pot because it's like this old guy term or whatever. Anyways, it's like something happens to me psychologically when I like the relationship that I have with that plant. Something switches in my brain when I engage with it, and it's bad. It's not good.
Yeah.
So I just can't touch it at all. Which I was actually speaking to just bring up Jeff Browning again too, because he uses it a lot, and we were talking about because his wife is similar to me. Like she can't even barely engage with it, and I think and one thing I said to Jeff was like, well, I think how I am sober is is what it does for people like Jeff. Like Jeff is like all over the place and just like his mind is going 1,000 miles an hour all the time. And for I think a lot of people that it like there's this like calming that happens.
Yes.
And this like able to like sort of sort your thoughts a little better. I think the way that I talk and the way that I think about things is like how most people do when they're like super stoned anyways. So like for me, it just like sends me into this like hyper fucking, it just doesn't work for me. I don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
But no, I totally agree. Like clearly, I mean, looking at me or like hearing me talk, I should smoke pot all the time, but I don't. So
It's just one of the stereotypes of the long hairs, you know.
yeah, for sure.
But mushrooms are performance enhancing for you.
That's that's such a good question. Every time he gets asked, it's a great question because it's just such an interesting conversation. And my usual first response to that question is, I think mushrooms can be, but won't be. I think for like the marathon 50K distance, I think mushrooms can be performance enhancing.
Wow.
I think for anything longer than that, it absolutely is not. One thing that happens, at least for me, is like, so I actually took some mushrooms at the beginning of Cocodona this year, because I actually hadn't touched mushrooms in probably 2 years, and then the week before Cocodona this year, I wasn't super stoked about some things that were happening with my like mental health like type stuff, and so I was like, well, maybe I'll revisit that and see. I do think I have this sort of like reputation of like running around on mushrooms all the time, and I think the only reason why that exists is because I talk about it quite a bit, like openly, but I actually don't like I said, I hadn't touched mushrooms in like 2 years until a few weeks ago. And I microdosed a couple times, and then the morning of the race I did similar to what I did the first year, like a hefty dose at the beginning. That wears off by about like hour 5 or 6 or something like that. And one thing that happens to me is I'm super uninterested in eating or drinking anything. So it's this conscious decision I have to make while I'm experiencing that, to eat and drink something, especially on that first section of Cocodona. As you know, it's like pretty important to drink some stuff, and it's like, so I also think I also think mushrooms are pretty good for at least for myself, like stripping away some of those superficial things that I can get dragged into. You know, I mean, this year, like all the talk about Cocodona, like the competitive field, all the runners, me being included in that field for whatever reason, me being a part of this documentary, like I'd be lying to everyone and myself if I didn't say that I was sucked into that a little bit.
Feeling it.
You know what I mean? Like you feel it and you get sucked into it a little bit. And it's actually a huge decision why I decided to take mushrooms at the beginning of this year at Cocodona, is because mushrooms really help me like solidify my motives and my goals, and realize how unconcerned I am with those other runners, other than wishing them the best race that they can possibly have. And so that was really good for me to like all that build up to Cocodona, all the interviews, all the movie, the fucking live stream, all that stuff, to like, just for myself to like guarantee like taking that first morning and being out there, you know, like I hung out and like talked to like Mika for like an hour. Like I didn't care at all with anybody. I might have talked to you. I don't even remember. Like it's like, but it's like, it's really good for that, for me to like clarify motives. And so like after, like with all the bullshit, like I said, leading up, not bullshit, but just all the stuff. And then just feeling that at the start, you know, and string bean and all this stuff. And it's like, no, you know, I'm actually back here. Like, this is my own thing. This is my own race. This is my own journey. I'm going to do the best that I can, but that's my own personal experience. And like, if I get to spend time with those guys, that's great, but it's not why I'm here. I'm not here to beat those guys. So like, that's why I did it. That's a long story to say why I did that this year. So like, I do have a good relationship with psilocybin, and it shows up again when not to be that guy that talks too much about that, but which I talk about it all the time. So I guess I am that guy. But
well, I feel like psychedelics can be a great it sounds like you were saying they're like a great conduit to making meaning out of chaotic situations. And I don't want to put words in your mouth or even like interpretations in your mouth, but I have to imagine that when you're put in that scenario of like being documented and being tagged with all these other elite runners as competitive and capable of doing something special on the course, that can be like pre-traumatic for the race. And then of course the race itself can be traumatic, right? Like I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that have completed multi-day stuff. You've done the AZT, the Colorado Trail, like that shit can be traumatic, right?
Absolutely. I think it's the most traumatic way that you can experience the outdoors. So agreeing to be a part of it, it satisfies other parts of our personality and our ego and our motives or whatever. It's like when you agree to do something as fast as you possibly can, you're not there for the you're not having a good time. It's like these aren't enjoyable ways of doing it, and in a lot of ways I do think that they are the worst way to experience things. It's actually why I said like a lot of people talking to me about how this is my last year running Cocodona, and I think a way of clarifying that is probably like, this is probably my last year trying to go as fast as I can. Like I not that I don't, as of right now, I don't want to speak in forever terms when I'm
Concrete terms.
when I'm talking about how I feel right now. Like as of right now, I don't feel like I'm ever going to race Cocodona again. But as of right now, there is a part of me that's like, in 10 years, when I'm like looking back on my ultra running career, like I wonder if I could do Cocodona in 120 hours or something like that. Or maybe even fuck it, like next year, like take 120 hours to do it. Have a completely different experience. Like run 50 miles a day and like go out to dinner and like sleep in a bed every night. Like it's just like a completely different experience, and it's like I have some interest in doing things similar to when I finished the Arizona Trail. I mean, like in a lot of those interviews, it's like people always ask me like what the Arizona Trail was like. I was like, I have no fucking idea. I don't remember any of it. And it was the worst possible way that you can experience the Arizona Trail. Like I have a huge desire to go back and hike the Arizona Trail, which I've never done. But like even after that, I was like, I'd like to come back and just hike it and actually experience it and like actually like meet people on the trail and meet other people hiking it. And like, because doing things in the fastest known time or trying to win a race, they're like running UTMB as fast as you can. I mean, that was a big deal with me at the year I ran UTMB. I had spent the 2 weeks prior to UTMB climbing in the Mount Blanc, like massive. So when the actual race came around, I was like, why am I going to run through these mountains as fast as I can and just like suffer? It's like, so I just didn't have the right mindset or motivation the year I ran UTMB, because like I had been in those mountains for 2 weeks, like experiencing them in a very different way. And it was like, so like go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, going back to Cocodona, like I know personally as a fan of the sport, I'm going to miss your presence at that race because and I think the movie, when it comes out, is going to achieve sort of like the sentimentality of all that. Like we're going to look back at 2024 Cocodona the same way you might look at like the mid 90s Suns and be like, I miss the Danny Ainge energy, I miss the Charles Barkley energy, like I miss Michael Versteeg being this check on like the super professionalized, soulless aspect of ultra running, right? Like, and can his persona and can his style, like in an underdog type way, like triumph and come out on top? And like, can we keep trying to run that experiment in subsequent years? Like, okay, Mike learned a lot, in 2024. Like, can he come back with that same style, but maybe a slightly more awareness of what it takes, and like beat the field in a rematch? Like, if we run it back for 2025, can Mike beat the field? Like that kind of stuff I'll miss.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, like I'll miss being a part of the race. Like I've said in some other interviews, like I think I'll always be a part of the race. I think I'll always be present at the race as long as I'm around and I'm in town and like can be present at that race. Like I said, I think my biggest contribution to that race has been the lore, like we said at the beginning of the interview, is like, I do think I've helped create some lore around Cocodona. In a lot of ways, I've just like, even, I mean, just the experience I have at Cocodona, especially that first day, is like when you're around all these other runners, like runners are stoked to see me and to be around and to run with me and to like experience some time. And like I feel that, especially because I'm on mushrooms, so you like feel people's like energy, and you feel people's like you just feel that. It's like very clear, and it's like I'm so like I feel so appreciative that I've become like this figure at this race. You know what I mean? That like people are stoked to have around, and people are, you know, like I've obviously never been able to watch the live stream, but from what other people have told me is like people like seeing me on the live stream, and it's like and I feel all of that. Like I feel that love, and I think that that's really awesome, and I will absolutely miss that. The reality of me not wanting to run Cocodona has nothing to do with me not wanting to be a part of the race, or not wanting to be around those people, or not wanting to contribute to it. It solely has to do with the fact that like I've done a lot of things that are extremely detrimental to my health in the last 10 years in ultra running.
Yeah.
And just getting to the point where I don't know if it's worth it anymore to do these super long things. I've never really recovered mentally or physically or psychologically or emotionally from the Colorado Trail experience. And I don't really ever want to relive anything like that again. So now I had a good experience at this year's Cocodona. So good that like thoughts have crept into my head about my involvement in future years. And again, I don't want to speak, I don't want to say anything, I don't want to commit to anything, I don't want to, because I don't know. But it's like I just don't know. I don't know what the future holds, and I think that last year and like leading up to this race, it was my goal to say like enough is enough. Like I don't need to keep killing myself, and just being a good example for my daughter. Like I don't necessarily want to do things that are like detrimental to my health anymore. And I think running and training for ultra marathons is like the best thing that any human being can ever do for themselves. The actual act of running 250 miles is like not good for you. Like I don't know like how your health is, or like how like what you've had to deal with over the last 10 weeks, but like or like I actually think 100 milers in a way are worse. Like running 100 miles in a single effort push at the fastest you can go for 100 miles is like pretty detrimental. At least to me, it's like detrimental to my health. Maybe not like physically, but just like the whole like I want to have good energy. You know what I mean? Like I'm an old dad. I'm 38 and had my first kid, but like I want to be 48 and still skateboarding with my daughter. You know what I mean? And it's like that's more important to me than running 250 miles at this point. So that's sort of that's the only reason why I've said I don't want to run Cocodona anymore. But worst case scenario is like I'll absolutely be there supporting other runners and trying to make people stoked for it. And yeah, and again, it is part of why I agreed to do the film, is because like, you know, try and see the race off in the right direction. And actually going way back to what you said earlier about how you were asking me about how you feel like the film, because of the contrasts that is shown in that film,
the value clashes too, the cultural clashes. And
it was actually before Dylan ever came to my house for this film, we had probably like a 2-hour long phone conversation on the phone, and just about all the things and how I was feeling about being a part of another film and how I feel like I've gotten enough attention at Cocodona. Like, let's highlight some other runners and blah, blah, blah. And like, I think one of the biggest things that he pointed out was like, after I had agreed to do the film, and he's like, look, I can come make a film about you and about saddles and about whatever, like, and your message gets delivered and like all of that's great, and maybe this is a conversation you also had with him at some point, but it was like, he just pointed out to me, he's like, your story and your message lands so much harder when that contrast is shown. And I think it is a goal of mine to show that like you can have success. I get that I'm an enigma, and like the fact that I have a running sponsor, and like not a lot of guys like me have support or sponsors. I don't think I'm an enigma in the sense of if you looked at all of trail runners in general, but as far as like sponsored athletes go, I think I'm kind of an enigma. And I get that I'm like really lucky, but I do embrace the opportunity to show people that like you can be successful in trail running and you can get a lot out of trail running, both like professionally and like personally and emotionally. And you don't have to subscribe to like the influencer, the social media, the professional athlete, the hyper competitive, the hyper professional like you don't have to subscribe to any of that. Like you can be yourself and you can be genuine and you can be authentic, and you're probably likely to have more success if you do that. And not even saying that has to look like me. It doesn't have to look like me at all. It could look like the stereotypical Solomon athlete. Like, but if that's your like genuine self, and if that's like who you are, then fucking do that like the best that you can. And it's like Arlen, like I like talking about Arlen because I think he's also an enigma, again, for very different reason. But like he was like, he's like talked about like having to like get social media accounts and like, or like having to do all this other stuff, or like, and potentially become the stereotypical professional ultra runner. And it's like, Arlen, like, don't do that. Like, be yourself, like lean into being yourself, because that's going to be the best for you. Like, and I think that he can do that. And I hope that he continues to do that. I think he has done that. And he's not compromising who he is as a person or the values that he has for any brand or for any, and like, that's what I admire. I'm not saying that everyone needs to like grow their hair long and get tattoos. I just want everyone to be genuine and to like fucking be who they are. And if you're that, you could have some success, and that's what I want to represent to people, is like, you can be successful just by being yourself and leaning into that and leaning into the things that you find important. So all of that to say, like when Dylan brought that up about that message landing home a lot more clearly when it's put in contrast with some of these other athletes. Again, I don't want that to come off sounding wrong, but I do think the contrast showed, and that's also true for their messages, right? Like for whatever message they have going into the film, or for whatever motives they have for being involved in the movie. I think their message also gets delivered a lot better when it's shown. That, again, to steal kind of your point and what you were trying to say. But
yeah. And for people in the audience that need more context, so this is Dylan Harris, who's a great filmmaker in our sport. And I don't know how much we can talk about it, but the way I've interpreted the direction of the film, it's sort of like if people watched Unbreakable about Western states 10, 15 years ago, like you had the four characters, Jeff Rose, Hal Kerner, et cetera. And like it's kind of reintroducing that type of storytelling style to the 2024 Cocodona 250. And hopefully it comes out at some point later this year, but I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, no, I think it will be a really good movie. I mean, I trust Dylan to make a really good film, and I think that, yeah, like I think like Dylan was talking about the movie Unbreakable and how he's watched it like 4 or 5 times leading up to this film, mostly because he's trying to not just make Unbreakable for Cocodona. Okay.
I take that back.
No, I mean, I think the premise clearly is that premise of like, here are these different runners, and here's a bit of their backstory. Here's some of their home life. Here's the race. But so you are 100% correct in the sense that like that is sort of the premise of the film. But I think he's also trying to have it be a original, creative movie. You know, he's not just trying to make that movie for Cocodona. You know, it's like he's trying to, and I think that he's going to succeed in that. I think that the time we've spent together filming have been very successful. I even did some things that I probably like just agreeing to be a part of the film. Once I agreed to be a part of the film, and again, I sort of went in with this agenda, right? Like I have all these like agendas, and like, but I also just once I decided to be a part of it, I just decided to, you know, not only am I going to be a part of it, I'm going to try and make it be the best film possible. So there's a lot of things that I did for Dylan, or things that he got glimpses into, or footage that he captured of us out at Granite Mountain that I wouldn't have done for anybody else, or I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing on film for anybody else. So it's like I think that at least on my end, I can't speak for the other guys if they were that open with him, but I think on my end, I tried to make it the best that I could possibly make it. So
Right on.
I hope and I trust Dylan to make a good story out of it. I mean, he's got his fucking hands full. I can tell you that, especially with what happened at the race this year. Because like Harry was not one of the original cast members of the film, and it's like
Jeff Garmeyer.
I mean Jeff. I don't think anyone thought Jeff was going to do what he did, and clearly no one thought Harry was going to win.
Yep.
So,
the originals were like Browning,
not valid.
You, Arlen. It was Browning, you, Arlen, and McKnight, right? Those were the four kind of original subjects.
No, I think Arlen got added, and I think it was String Bean.
String Bean.
Yeah,
right.
It was
Joe
originally
Bean, yeah.
Joe, myself, Jeff, and McKnight. But yeah, so I think, you know, Dylan's got a hell of a task on his hands just with the amount. I was actually talking to him about like, does it make more sense as like a mini series at this point? Because you got 6 guys that you're documenting their lives. You have the whole race, you have pre-race, you have post-race. Is like, what does the format really make sense? You know, I don't know. It's not none of my business, but I trust Dylan is going to be able to figure it out and tell a good story and make a good film. So
I've got 3 topics that I told myself I had to ask you about.
Yeah, let's do it.
One is Alaska Mountain Wilderness. One is Ultramarathon de Caballo Blanco. And then I also have John Wesley Powell written down here for some reason. Okay. I want to start with the Caballo Blanco race, because I was reading your trip report from 2015. Before reading this, my ideal of it, or my kind of mental model of it, was that Born to Run book, right? I had no idea that like it was enabled by the cartels and that things got pretty rough down there. So for people that don't know, can you like fill them in on like what that experience was like?
Yeah, so I've been to that race twice in my life, and the first year I went was really awesome. I didn't know anything. I'd never run Born to Run, still have never read the book. Probably don't tell anybody that, but so that's fine. Like I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. Like living in Arizona and like sort of in border country my whole life, and it's like and just like being a person who traveled my whole life, and like I've traveled through Copper Canyons and Mexico a bunch of times, and then, you know, 12 years ago, I started getting into ultra running, and it's like, oh, like I hear of this race, that there's a race that you can run with the Tarahumara. I was like, well, that sounds fucking awesome. Like, let's go. And so like we went down, and it was at that race that I discovered there was this whole other part of that race. And that whole other part was the Born to Run stuff. And the Micah True and the Caballo Blanco and that whole scene, like, and I was certainly taken in by that community pretty quickly, but I never felt totally comfortable with that community. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I think I need to sort of clarify my actions the following year. And the first year of the race went really well. It was like super fun. Ricky Gates and I were like the two first gringos of that race or whatever.
Nice.
And like that's actually where Ricky and I met, and like Ricky and I have become friends, and it's like for kind of probably obvious reasons. But like yeah, just a great experience, like super cool, so much so that I like wanted to come back the next year. And like again, a lot of the like race organizing people, like the Caballo Blanco Born to Run people, like invited me back, and it's like, you know, like yes, I'd love to come back. And then that second year, really long story short, ended up being a lot of cartel violence on the actual course. Like I think like one or maybe two. I don't actually remember. Maybe you remember better because you've read it more recently than I have. But like there were some deaths and some kidnappings, and there was some bombs that went off like on course, and like a few days leading up to the race, and just a lot of stuff went down that weekend that sort of burst a lot of Americans' bubbles and perceptions about what that race was and where it was, and the sort of you know, there's the reality of the race weekend, you know, and a bunch of white Americans invading upon this small community at the bottom of Copper Canyon, and the sort of safety net that's provided from that. And then there's the other 51 weeks out of the year where, you know, it's cartel country, and it's, you know, like you run through poppy fields on the course, you know. And I think that when all that stuff went down, the race organizers, and I do not disagree with this decision at all. That I think that was one thing that I should say publicly, is I do not disagree with canceling the race. Like if a fucking bomb went off and somebody died on the Saddles course the day before the race, it's like, we're not having the race. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, or if like runners are potentially in danger on the course, like, okay, so again, I don't disagree with having like a commercially sanctioned event, like after something like that happens. The thing I disagreed with was the race organizers and all of the tourists basically decided to say, like, we're not going to run as like this stand of peace. Like they essentially said, as long as there's violence in the canyons, we're not going to run. And they took like a big stand. And so like, which basically meant for most of those people, they all left. Everybody left. And so the locals said, well, if you're not going to have the race, we're going to do the race without you. Like we're going to continue to have the race. Like, you guys do whatever you want. And I think because I was invited to Copper Canyon by the Born to Run people and the race organizers, I felt a certain amount of like, I'll do whatever you guys say. And then the morning of the race rolled around, and like all the local Mexicans and all the local Tarahumara and like all the locals were running. The only people that weren't running were the white people. And I was like sitting there watching, and I was like, this is fucking bullshit. And so I just like, I had my shorts on underneath my pants and like my shoe, like, and I just like ripped my pants off, and like I just like ran up to the start. This is like maybe like 20 minutes after they started. And I like ran up to the start line. I was like, draw a number on me. And like the locals like drew a number on me, and like all the locals were like clapping and cheering. And I like took off and like started running. And it's like, and I think if I was anybody else, this is going to sound a little egotistical, but it's like, I need to say it to get the point across. I think if I was anybody else, nobody would have cared. But because I was like the white people's like racehorse, like everyone like wanted me to win the race that year. You know what I mean? As far as like the non-locals go, like, and like Miguel Lara and like all these other like fast local runners like knew who I was, and was like, you know, so but the fact that it was because it was me that chose to run, I think everyone took that as like I was taking this like big dramatic stance either against or for somebody. And it just wasn't really the case. It was literally just watching all the people, like all the locals starting to run. And I remember in my head thinking, was like, well, not running doesn't ever seem like the right answer. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to go run. And I actually saw Maria, who is like Caballo Blanco's partner, Micah's partner. And she was a big part of the race organization. I actually saw her like 100 yards after I started running. and I just like stopped and I grabbed her and like gave her a hug, and I was like, I respect your decision, but just know that this is my decision to like choose to run. And she like gave me a big hug and like kissed me on the cheek and like was like, you know, but I do. So all of that was fine. I do think the mistake was that the way that I wrote that article and it got picked up by Runner's World, I think it definitely came off as like calling some people out, which maybe I did, because like the way you have to understand the way that that's interpreted by like local people down there, when like, oh, we live here 365 days a year. And when the cartel decides to kidnap somebody or to kill one of our family members, we can't just leave. Like, we fucking live here. And the fact that that happened, and at the first like sign of a pin dropping, all the white people like put on their Patagonia and North Face shit and fucking booked it out of town and took the first flights like out of town back to like San Clemente or Santa Barbara or whatever. Like, that's not a great look. It's just not. You know what I mean? And I do think the race has recovered from that year at this point. Like, I think it's like a successful, I haven't been in a long time, but it's like, I do think me publicly sort of like what I just said to you, I sort of said publicly in that article. And I think I definitely like, it took a while for some of those like relationships and friendships to come back, because I do think that I maybe should have done that in a more like no matter how politely you say publicly to somebody that you did something wrong, there's no great way of saying that. And I don't think everyone choosing to leave town and not run with the locals who were there to run the race, I think that was a wrong decision. And I'm glad that I was able to recognize that while I still had the opportunity to jump in and run the race, versus recognizing that from like the plane of the window as I'm flying out of town. You know what I mean? Like, I was able to recognize that 20 minutes after the start while I still had an opportunity to jump in and run the race. So like, I feel lucky that happened. But
were you running scared in the sense that like there could be bombs exploding around you and there could be violence at any point on the course? No,
never, because I think if that threat was real, none of the locals would have run. I think that I think as a traveler, like, you embrace the advice and the mindset of the locals, not of the other tourists. And that was really big for me. Like if the locals were like, okay, we're not going to run either, it's too dangerous, I wouldn't have run. But the only people that didn't run were the people from California and from wherever, you know. It's like all the Americans and all the international runners. Those are the only people that didn't run that year. And so,
it makes me think about a lot of travel advisories, not just for third world countries, but for even countries like the US, where like, how much do you abide? Like, theoretically, you could have an advisory permanently on the US saying that if you decide to travel here, a mass shooting could happen, right? Because we have a ton of mass shootings in this country. Like, that's like one of our things we have to reckon with. So, and we live in it, right? Like, we live under the threat of that every single day, regardless of whether you're in New York or California or Texas, whatever. Like, it's something that we live under.
I also think, just like when you spend your time traveling a lot, like, you sort of realize that like all travel advisories are pretty fucking silly, in the sense that like, you just need to be a smart person. Like, in the same way that like, I'm not going to walk through a subway through like New York City or like, I'm not going to walk down, like, I'm not going to spend my time like running down back alleys in New York City at 3 a.m. Because like, maybe don't do that. You know, so it's like you just use that same sort of thing anywhere that you are. It's like, don't put yourself in dangerous situations, and you're probably fine. And I didn't feel like at any point I put myself in a dangerous situation. Actually, the most dangerous part of that entire weekend was the night before the race. Was the race had announced everyone was in like the square of the town, and like the race had announced that they were canceling the race, like, publicly. and like a bunch of locals were like there, and there was like a lot of drinking going on, and like locals were like grabbing the mic and like saying just like some like it just wasn't a great vibe. It was like super like something's like about to happen here, and it's not going to be
a revolt's going to happen, or
it's
something.
like not going to be great, because there's a lot of I mean that weekend is and has become like the biggest weekend for that entire community that's not drug related. And so to cancel the race is not, it's not like it's this small decision that has zero consequences. Like not having the race has very real consequences on that community. And that was the only time that I ever felt like, oh shit, like this feels like, you know that feeling you get like in a public situation, or if there's like a fight that happens or something. Like it kind of felt like that, where it was like, that was the only time I remember ever feeling weird. The morning of the race felt awesome. It actually was like, I mean, again, I'm gonna fucking like, fuck it, I'll just say it. It felt like the most authentic way I possibly could have experienced that race. Like I was the only fucking white person to get to run, you know what I mean? And it was like, so yeah, it was, I mean, for me, it was all great experiences. The one regret I have is like ruffling feathers with the article, but I felt like I needed to sort of explain myself a little bit, like publicly, because I think if I hadn't, I think my decision to run would have been contrived as worse than me explaining myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, so it's like I don't write a whole lot of things, but when I do, it seems to have.
We'll link to it in the show notes. It was good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad we had a chance to touch on it here. Got to ask you about the Alaska Mountain Wilderness Classic too. So like how you were introduced, what made it interesting, and you know what was meaningful about it in retrospect. So I feel like this is not on many people's radar. So I'd love to hear you kind of rip on that.
It's funny. I brought up the Colorado Trail experience earlier. The Colorado Trail experience was very negative for a lot of reasons, but the Alaskan experience was really negative because I almost fucking died, like, and I was out of my element and I was not prepared for it. I'm not good at water sports. I'm not comfortable on big Alaskan whitewater and pack rafts at mile 200 when I haven't slept, again because I can't sleep during these things. And I made a lot of really dumb mistakes on the water. I went swimming, which you do not fucking do. I went swimming a couple times, and it's fucking dangerous, dude. And it's like, and that's just for me because like I'm not a water sports guy. Like I'm used to Southwestern water, where you come up to a rapid, you get out, you look at it, you like figure out the best way of going through. Everyone gets nervous, and then one person does it, and you realize it's not that big of a deal, and everyone does it and laughs, and then you like sit there and float again for 2 hours, and then you like come up to the next rapid and like repeat. You know what I mean? Like water sports to me are like leisurely, and pack rafting in Alaska is not leisurely. It's like, and so anyways, I've spent a fair bit of time in Alaska. I have a friend, Nick Trinan, who lives up there. And Nick went to Prescott College, so I met him from Prescott. And Nick and Lex and like that whole family up in Alaska are big skiers. They're all like cross country. Same with all the trail running scene up there. I don't know if you've ever experienced the trail running scene up in Alaska, but it's like, especially the summer races, it's like it's all of the cross country like skate, like Olympic skate team that goes to APU. They like jump into these trail runs. That's why all the trail races up there are so competitive and so hyper competitive, because you have all these like Olympic athlete, like Olympic skiers running these races. Anyways, that's just an interesting little side note. But Nick and I have become friends, and he has a big property along with my other friend Glenn that has a big property up on Lazy Mountain outside of Palmer, Alaska. And Nick did the race the year before we did it together as a solo, and he won the race. and I was supposed to do it that year with him, but I got COVID that year, so I didn't go. And I did the Colorado Trail instead that year. But then when the next year rolled around, Nick wanted to do it again, but he didn't want to do it solo because he thought it was too dangerous. So he said, like, I was one of the only people that he could see doing that with. I think because he respected my ability and he respected a lot of things about me in the outdoor world, that he felt comfortable doing that with me. And I feel like I failed Nick.
Why?
Because I was dangerous. Because I wasn't capable of doing that race safely, and I bit off like more than I could chew. And I think Nick is one of the most accomplished Alaskan like outdoor athletes that I've ever met. And I think anyone who knows like Alaskan outdoor sports, whether it be like skiing or running or like they know the Trinans, and you know, like they know that family. And but Nick is like overly humble. He's like the classic little brother. He like doesn't think anything he does is that impressive or like that. So he thinks everyone can just kind of do that stuff. And I think it's actually a case where having too much humility in certain situations isn't good. I think it's a really healthy thing that you like acknowledge. And I've even had to do this like for myself, like with trail running and other mountain sports, where it's like holding everyone to the same standard as you because you're overly humble isn't really fair to everyone around you.
It can be dangerous.
Can be very dangerous. And I think Nick overestimated my ability on like Alaskan waters. I think I did too. And I think that like, and we made a massive mistake at the beginning of the race. There's a big decision every team at that race has to make, and it's whether or not to bring dry suits. And we chose to not bring dry suits because we decided that the sections that we had to run in pack rafts weren't that bad. And so I was hypothermic for the entire time I was out there and just trying to get through it. And it was just another complete like sufferfest. And I was embarrassed about my experience with Nick. I feel like because when you do that sort of thing as partners, you know, I put him in a lot of danger as well by making stupid mistakes. Basically relaxing. There were a lot of times where we would get to a big river and I would let my guard down and I would relax because I thought we were good. And like the last, we're 5 miles from the finish. So for anyone that doesn't know, the Alaskan Mountain Wilderness is, or the God, I can't even think. The Wilderness Classic is, they move the race every 3 years. They've been doing it for a few decades now. And every 3 years, the route gets moved, but it's always around a 200-mile, completely wilderness trek through different parts of Alaska that involves, they also have a winter one, which is a lot of skiing, like obviously skiing, which actually I know it sounds crazy, but the winter one is actually a lot more enjoyable and easier than the summer one because the winter one, you can just ski over everything. Summertime in Alaska is like very wet, very buggy, very boggy, very difficult terrain to move through versus the winter ones, you can just ski over everything. So not to downplay the winter one. The winter one's still like pretty gnarly too, but
I've got the Wikipedia pulled up for it now. Like, it's pretty cool to see just like how the route has evolved over the years. And I see, like, I mean, you and Nick, I mean, you guys won the race in 2022.
We did win the race. Yeah. So that's something that like people, like when I talk about it, they're like, well, you won the race. And I was like, well, yeah, again, like race is a big quotation marks around race. You know what I mean? But it's like everyone
can use a paraglider in this thing in some years.
You can do anything. it's a point A to point B route, and however you think you can get there the fastest is game. So if you want to haul a paraglider to the top of a mountain and jump off of it, like, you're welcome to do that, but you have to haul that paraglider for the next 200 miles as well. So yeah, it's
there was a guy who was 81 years. He was 81 years old and he finished in 2008.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy, dude. The whole race. So like, I think everyone in Alaska, like at least in the outdoor community, like everyone in Alaska knows about the Wilderness Classic. Like if you can bring it up in conversation, but like I think the year I did it, there were like 15 people who started it. Like everyone knows about it and everyone like talks about it. And if you win it, like you're like, I definitely have like a lot of fucking cred with people up there for like doing that race with Nick, but like nobody wants to do it. Like no one's interested in actually doing it because it's brutal, man. It's like, it's gnarly. It's not gnarly in the sense of like Barkley. Like if you get lost, you just like find your way back. It's like if you drop, you have to call in an airplane. It's the only way to get out. And the year we ran it, the year we did it, it was so wet that no airplane could land because there was so much moisture still on the ground. Any of the air pads that they had up in the mountains, the only way to get out is to hire a helicopter. So if you drop from the race, you have to charter a helicopter from to like come and get you. There's no way out. It's like there's just no fucking way out. So it's like it's a potentially dangerous. That's why I've had a lot of friends in the lower 48 ask me about it and like ask me how they sign up and how they do it. And I was like, look, I'll tell you like with the like sort of, or I'll like get you on the email list with the sort of agreement that like understand I don't want you to do this. Like it's not a safe thing, at least for me. And I mean, I think a lot of the people who do it like do it safer. But Nick and I, again, were trying to race it. We were trying to do it as fast as we could. We brought less gear, which made it more dangerous. And I made some really stupid decisions out there, which ended up like putting myself and Nick in danger. And I still feel bad about it, like, to be totally honest.
Did the fact that
this might be the first time I've ever publicly like talked about it too. I don't really like talking about it. It wasn't like I had like nerve damage on my feet for like 2 or 3 months after that. Like it was like I'd be back in Prescott in the middle of summertime and it'd be like 95 degrees out and I'm pouring sweat and I'd be driving around my like old shitty 4Runner with the heater on full blast on my feet because my feet were like freezing cold for like 2 weeks after the race. And I had like pretty bad nerve damage on like the bottom of my feet. Like it took a few months for like the feeling to come back on the bottom of my feet. And it was like fucked up, dude. Yeah.
So you think this race makes Barkley look tame?
In some ways, in the danger to the athlete. Absolutely.
Wow.
I don't think it's harder than Barkley. I think Barkley's this uniquely thing where he's like found something that's like right on that line of like people finish the Wilderness Classic every year, you know, and it's like it's actually not that great. Like you can do it safely and you can do it appropriately. Again, and this is going back to the Cocodona conversation. It's going back to the Arizona Trail conversation. It's like, if you just don't race it and you do it like in a more appropriate manner, you can have like really awesome experiences and you can do all that. If you're trying to race and do it as fast as you can, you make certain safety decisions, trade-offs. Yeah. And like I think there was a part of me that wanted to go back and do it again with Nick and to do it correctly. Because I think there's a thing that I have where like I remember out at Granite Mountain. Granite Mountain is the big like multi-pitch climbing area outside of Prescott where I've like obviously climbed a lot. And it's like I had to watch this Prescott College student one day like take a huge fall and had to like lower him down off the mountain and like my friend Josh and I who were climbing together had to be the guys to like lower him off the mountain and get him back to the trailhead. And luckily he ended up being okay. But it was like the next day Josh and I went out and climbed the route that he was on. I think just for ourselves, like psychologically moving forward, knowing that like it was him, it wasn't the rock, it wasn't the mountain, it was him as a climber that made it dangerous. So I think it's good to like sort of move past these traumatic things that happen in outdoor sports and realize that the traumatic things that happen can be mitigated, can be controlled. So there was a part of me that wanted to go back and do it in a safe way with Nick, which I feel like having the experience of the first year and just being a quote unquote veteran of the race, I could have done it a lot better, more efficiently, faster, and more safely. I think I could have done all of those things. But now that I have a daughter, like I'm not ever going to go out on a pack raft in Alaskan whitewater again. Like I'd rather free solo shit up a Granite Mountain, which like, you know, like I'd rather do that than if the Alaskan Mountain Wilderness Classic moved to a route that didn't have to be pack rafted, which I don't think it ever will, because that's like an integral part of that race. Maybe, but I don't trust myself on big Alaskan water anymore. It's like, unless I took the time to like get good at water sports, but I've always been afraid of water. It's one reason I've never floated the entire Grand Canyon. Like I floated a bunch of segments of it in my pack raft, but like I don't like big water. I'm scared of it. So yeah.
Damn. One of the things that strikes me about you is like you have so much physical and mental courage, but you're also pretty forthright about instances where you've been intimidated or scared or even just like reflective of like mistakes. And I really really respect that and kind of want to honor that here because
thanks.
I think it's one thing to like to like really demonstrate that like you're a badass and like you know you can do tough shit, but like to have that like sensitive side, I guess, is admirable too. Like I just want to say like I honor that and I appreciate that a lot. And
that means a lot. I appreciate it. So
yeah.
I mean I try and be honest about stuff, and like again, like acknowledging, like it shouldn't be taboo to say this, like acknowledging your own ability with things. Like I am pretty fucking good at some things, and that's fine to like that's fine to acknowledge, you know what I mean? Like I don't think everyone can run.
Like you said, it's actually dangerous not to acknowledge.
It's dangerous not to acknowledge it, and it puts other people around you in bad situations to assume everyone can do everything that you can do. And it's like it when you think that about yourself, when you think you're not better than anyone at anything else, it creates bad dynamics because you get really frustrated with those people, and the other people in turn feel embarrassed, they feel insulted. It just creates bad dynamics. Like it's really important for safety in the mountains for everyone to set their egos aside and acknowledge their skill set, know what you're good at, know what you're bad at. Like I'm bad at river fucking sports, like period. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that I'm actually like, pretty bad at, like, but I also need to acknowledge what I'm really good at, because then I don't have that expectation of other people, and I know I have to like tone it down and like help those people through that stuff. So it's one of those things where like social sort of niceties, or the way that we're taught to behave socially, doesn't actually work very well. So you have to,
Last topic question, I promise. How would the American Southwest look different if we had listened to John Wesley Powell?
Yeah, actually, I made a bumper sticker one time that said, it had a big picture of him, and it just said "Not My Lake" on it, because of Lake Powell, you know. And it's like he would have fucking hated Lake Powell with a passion. Everything that he preached and everything that he talked about with like water conservation. Well, it's also important when talking about guys like this, like Powell, or like even like Roosevelt or something, these like sort of early figures in the conservation movement, is that the word conservation back then didn't mean wilderness conservation. It meant conservation of resources. So when like Theodore Roosevelt is talking about like how national forests need to be conserved, he's talking about the resource of wood needs to be like conserved and taken care of so that we can exploit that. And that goes into a big thing that people don't understand about the BLM and the national forest is like, unless it's a wilderness, unless it's set aside as a wilderness conservation is not their goal. Like mineral or like, I can't say it any better than a conservation of resources. So it sort of like just clarifies how things operate when like we're talking about public lands in this country, is to understand that the National Forest Service is not a conservation society or a wilderness society unless it's a wilderness area. So John Wesley Powell was really instrumental in water development when he was alive. He was a director of something. I can't tell you the biography of the guy, but he was in like the Geological Society and doing a lot of it, like water development stuff, especially after his exploratory years. He got really into like the conservation of water resources. And basically everything that the Bureau of Reclamation has done in the 20th century has been in like direct conflict with his advice for water resources. So in short, I mean, that's a, the world would be very different. I mean, the entire Western development of why we have towns where they do, and why we have roads where they are, and why we have infrastructure where we have infrastructure, is because of two things. It's because of the railroad, and it's because of water. And water development projects over the 20th century completely shaped the landscape of the American West. And it's actually, I would recommend everyone to like, try and think of a book like a book like Cadillac Desert.
Cadillac Desert. Have you read Cadillac Desert?
So Cadillac Desert is hard to get through. It's sort of an academic book a little
I liked
bit.
It.
Yeah. But Cadillac Desert is one of the most eye-opening books for why the West exists the way it does. So if you want to know why the West, like the entire, like the 13 states in the American West, like everything west, not of the 100th meridian, but close to the 100th meridian, like the 13 big Western states. So it's like New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana. I think I drew that right. Those states and everything west of there. Why everything exists the way that it does, then like read Cadillac Desert. I think it's one of the most eye-opening books that there is. Anyways, and basically that entire book is outlining the United States' approach to water conservation, which John Wesley Powell would have just thrown up in his mouth about how we do it. And there's reasons. I mean, you look at the state of Arizona, you look at the Southwest, and you look at the flooding of some of the greatest like wilderness areas that has ever existed, and the catastrophes that we're dealing with now. John Wesley Powell was a really big advocate of like, this is fucking turning into a history lesson. He was a really big advocate of like small water storage places and lots of them, versus these like massive reservoirs that we have, like Lake Powell and Lake Mead in the Southwest, which is like just not great for long-term sustainability, a whole host of other reasons. But the guy's fucking awesome too, just as a historical figure. Like how many like white Civil War era historical figures do we have that was like advocating for like Aboriginal rights, and would like there's always like pictures of him like painted up and dressed up and like hanging out with Aboriginal, or like that's maybe the term I shouldn't use. But it's like he was just an awesome fucking dude, and there's not a lot of like historical figures that were awesome dudes. Most of them were like slave owners. So
right.
Yeah. He's like, of all the people in this country that are like held up on pedestals, how he's not one of them. He's a fucking American hero.
I really want to double thumbs up Cadillac Desert. Because I live in Salt Lake City, and it's a huge pending issue, the drying up of the Great Salt Lake, and what would happen. Could the Wasatch Front even exist as a population center if that thing dries up? One of the big scary stories that we always think about is from Cadillac Desert, where Lake Owens dries up, and you have to evacuate that whole community, right? Because all of those, whatever, it's like the metals that exist on the bottom of that lake, when they're exposed and they catch wind, it's toxic, right?
Like the salt, Salton Sea in California is
So Los Angeles was pretty predatory. Like, in order for Los Angeles to grow, they had to take on pretty predatory, like, water resource tactics to be what it became today.
Fucking insane, the stuff they did, and the things they're still doing. It's really, really crazy. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, famously, the movie Chinatown or whatever is about it. But it's just, it's all super interesting. And like I said, I just being like a citizen in the Western United States and just understanding why things are the way that they are. I mean, water development and the Bureau of Reclamation, the Interior Department. It's like, water development and railroads. It's crazy.
I think everyone's going to take something different from this conversation. For me, what's stuck with me throughout is I need to reintroduce more boredom into my life. That's my next course of action. I really think for me, that was an important takeaway. Because I think I was on my generation, which is maybe slightly after you, was on that fringe of like, there was boredom, but like we also kind of had access to like the Razor phones and stuff. So I want more of that in my life. I think
what's been good for me is, again, I mean, I know I'm a broken record here, but like having a daughter and just like we're not even going to watch like movies with her until she's 3 years old. You know what I mean? It's like that first few years of like childhood development, we just feel like is so important. Like no screens, no televisions, no phones, no anything. And it's like having her as an excuse to like remove all of that stuff has like really helped me. And like I'm playing more guitar and I'm skateboarding more and I'm, built a climbing wall and built a mini ramp and have the band room and I'm playing music with people and recording music again for the first time in like a decade, and it's because you don't realize how much of an effect it has on you when you're constantly getting those whatever buttons pushed in your brain and you're constantly getting those satisfied by like fucking reels, it's like, or whatever. It's like it's like one of those things that's like drinking, like I don't drink anymore. Like I haven't drank in a few years. And it's like, you don't realize how much people drink until you stop drinking. Like you don't realize how like everyone's social engagement and lifestyle revolves around having a drink until you stop doing it. And then you're like, oh shit, like we fucking drink a lot, but you don't realize it. And it's the same thing with your phone. It's the same thing. I mean, I don't mean to like talk shit about like YouTube because I'm on a podcast that's going to be on YouTube right now. It's like we can all be a part of it and we can all exist in it, but it's like making conscious decisions. Like it's not something, again, it's like we talk a lot about the same way that like all these like professional athlete runners talk about balance, and like they're some of the most like unbalanced people ever. You couldn't contain your laugh when I said
that's not safe for them to say. Talking about safety, that's not safe for them to say.
So like that, I mean, that's a big thing in ultra running, right? You hear all these guys say like, oh, I'm just like balance in my, it's
preference
like
falsification,
and it's like you're some of the most unbalanced people I've ever met in my life. And it's like, and then it's the same thing with like cell phones. Like we all talk about how like we need to have like responsible relationships with like cell phones and like, or like with our kids, like we need to like limit screen time. It's like, why are you limiting screen time? Like you need to limit screen time. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, why do we think that like our kids' generation is going to be better at it when we're not even capable of having a healthy relationship with it? Like, I still think my wife and I look at our phones way too much. You know what I mean? And it's like there's something about it that like, even though I want to be better so bad, I'm not able to like, I still like, if I'm like taking a shit, I still open Instagram. You know what I mean? It's like we used to have a joke about that, how like, anyways, I'm sure that's like a popular joke, but it's like, yeah, it's like it takes very conscious decisions and deliberate actions on your part to like remove that aspect of your life. And I think for a lot of people, that's like television, you know what I mean? So it's like, you don't realize how much television you watch until you stop watching television. It's like, holy shit, I used to watch a lot of television. Or your cell phone. It's like, holy shit, I used to always be on my phone, didn't even realize it. You know what I mean? And what's been really big for me is like, if my daughter like crawls into the room and I have my phone in my hand, It's like, it's not good enough to just put the phone down, because she already saw it. She already walked into the room. She already saw me looking at this fucking thing. And she's already prioritizing that thing that I'm clearly prioritizing. So like, it's not just good enough to put your phone down and to not engage with it. It has to be more than that. It has to be like I actually get a lot of shit from my friends and family about how bad I am with my phone. It's because this idea that we have to respond to everyone immediately. Like it'll take me at least, like, if you text or call me during the day, like, I will not respond until at least that evening, if you're lucky. Like, it could go into like the next night or something like that. It's because I've consciously had to say, like, I'm not going to look at my phone from like morning until evening. And so like this idea that we have to respond to every text message within a few minutes, or we have to, like, someone calls us and it's like, why didn't you call me back? And it's like, well, I did call you back, but on my own fucking terms. Like, I'm not addicted to my phone like everybody else. So like, well, I mean, I kind of am. That's why I've had to go through extreme measures to not do it. But it's like, just putting things down is not good enough. It's like separating yourself from that is really important, because clearly I've demonstrated to myself I'm not capable of having a healthy relationship with it if my phone's always on me. I've demonstrated that. If it's on me, every time someone texts me, I open it up and I look, and then I accidentally click on Instagram, and then I accidentally click on Facebook Marketplace because I need a fucking trampoline or whatever. You know, it's like I'm not capable of having a healthy relationship with it. So put it away, completely separate it, and then you'll be bored, and then you'll fill that time with writing or telling stories or podcast, you know, like creating things. Like, be an active member of yourself, first of all, and of human beings. Like, don't be a passive observer of just, I mean, it's fine to observe things, fine. Like, people are watching me say this. So it's like you can observe things, but you also need to engage with the world around you. And in today's world, it takes conscious, deliberate actions to engage with the world around you and to be an active member of, again, yourself and of the human race and society. So it's like, it takes fucking effort today. It's not easy anymore. So
I know we didn't do a formal intro, but I do want to do a formal outro. And I'll just say I deeply appreciate this conversation. I know we went relatively long in the scheme of things. I don't think I've done a 3-hour podcast before, so it means a lot. And I'm stoked to have gotten to know you better and really appreciate your perspective. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, right back at you. You know what I mean? When you emailed me about doing it, I know we've like danced around it for a while now, but just, I mean, I actually wish we could talk more about your experience. Maybe we still can. But if
you can ask me whatever you want.
I mean, how was your experience? I mean, first off, like, quick, what's your reaction to when somebody asks you that?
That
was perfect. That sigh.
I want to couch it in a way that makes it as accessible as possible, because I want. Yeah.
Are you glad? Are you glad that you did it?
Of course.
Are you going to do it again?
I can't. The race has gotten too popular. I can't pony up $1,500 this quickly off of a race. Like,
what if it was free?
Oh yeah, 100%.
You would do it, yeah.
Yeah, I would do it again. Yeah, I'm on the Cocodona crack pipe for sure. But like, yeah, like, it's already sold out, and there's 400 people on the wait list or something crazy like that, and it's a week after the race. It's blown up.
I did not know that. Holy shit.
Yeah, it's already sold out, and there's already, I mean, it's May 22nd, and the last time I checked, there was about 275 people on the wait list. So it's hit escape velocity.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I love that race. And I think the big takeaway for me was that it's actually pretty easy to do something that's relatively hard if you're like spiritually invested in it. Mm-hmm. And this was, I've never experienced alignment for a race just on like a existential level or whatever as I have with Cocodona. Like just I think a lot of that I chalk up to, again, the heart and soul piece of this, and Jamil, and I'm sure you were involved in it to some extent, like architecting a route that had a ton of meaning, like from start to finish. Like I was never any point in the race like looking forward to Flagstaff, because I got to see Crown King and Arastra and Whiskey Row and Jerome. Like, geez, Jerome is a trip.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Like that, it was an end in and of itself. So nothing was wasted. Like I was engaged the whole time, and I can't say that about most races. So
yeah, I mean, just based off my own experience this year, I never once even thought about dropping.
Yeah.
Like it never even like, and I think to anyone who's even run 100-miler, like you think about dropping a fucking lot.
All the time.
And it's like, I had just committed this year. I just knew I was going to finish. And it never even entered my head that dropping was like a thing. And I don't know how. I actually, it was something I realized after the race. I was like, that's incredible. I never even thought about it.
Yes.
Which I think is amazing. How many had you ever done a multi-day before?
Through hike of the Appalachian Trail back in 2014. So like the mentality of not getting over fixated on a finish and being comfortable with like going through the night and stuff, like that was not foreign to me. So that helped a ton.
You did it,
but
fast?
I had never. Yeah, I had to get back to like a job, so I did it in like 3 months, which is kind of compressed, but not like the month and a half you see like a Scott Jurek or what you did on the AZT. Like it was like fast, but not fast. If that makes sense. Yeah. So, but yeah, the big thing for me was just, it's going to be extremely hard for me to ever sign up for another race without a very like rigorous examination of like what's gone into the race. Like you talked about saddles, like almost everything you're saying about saddles, like that checks the boxes of why you would sign up for something. Like I largely agree with like your approach to race directing and like why you would create something in the first place. So yeah,
well,
I don't know. What's the matrix term? Like red pilled or blue pilled? Is it red pilled?
Yeah,
I've been red pilled in terms of events.
Yeah, I mean, well, you'll always, just a tangent, you'll always, if you want to run saddles, you're always welcome for free. I'll give you a spot.
Appreciate that.
I mean, that's actually, maybe I shouldn't say this on like a public forum, but it's like, if anyone ever asked me for a free spot, I'd be like, yeah, sure. Like, it's like I don't really care. But I mean, like people make a big like people want me to run a 50K or open a 50K. Like I get messages all the time for people wanting to run a 50K.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, just come run a 50K. Like you don't have to run the whole 50. And it's like, well, it's like, and then they're like, and then their next response was be like, well, it'd be cheaper if it was a 50K, isn't it? And it was like, well, it's on public lands. Like just come run whatever you want. Like I don't care. Like this, like the idea that like or like I have some other like sponsored runner friends like sort of around Arizona, and I think because it's like it's on ultra sign up and they don't want like things to show up, it's like just come run, like don't sign up, like just come do whatever you want. This idea that we have to do anything at these races is like I sort of want to move away from that. Like if you want to run a 30K with some aid stations in between, choose whatever 30 miles of the saddles course that you love the most and come run that 30 miles. And if you want to contribute to the community, then sign up. If you don't want to contribute, then just come run it. And that's totally fine too. You'll still be a part of the community. It's like, do whatever the fuck you want at these races. And so it's like, I think like a lot of times we run races to challenge ourselves and do what we set out to do, right? But if that's not the case for you, if you still want to be a part of the race and still want to be a part of the community, like please do so. Or like all these other rules surrounding races, like I would get a lot of emails last year about like, can we use poles? It's like, I don't fucking care if you use poles or not. It's like, or like, can we have dogs? Like, I don't care. Like or like the last 2 miles runs from the trailhead like down into town and like through town, and I would get emails from people about like, can my crew all pace me that like last 2 miles, or am I going to get disqualified? I was like, you can literally do whatever the fuck you want to do. Like this idea around races where like it's so like regimented and rules, and like you can't like do anything, or like I got shit the first year at Cocodona because people outside of Flagstaff were like meeting me on the trail and like wanting to drink a beer with me. And it's like, so I would stop and drink a beer with them. People are like, oh, he's receiving aid from outside or whatever. And it's like if somebody runs into you at Saddles and wants to give you something and engage with you, like I might disqualify you for not, because you're being an asshole. Be a part of the community, engage with everyone that wants to engage with you. If you're like all outside crew is allowed. Your crew can access you at any point during Saddles, wherever you want, and can give you whatever the fuck you want. Like, I do not care. Like, I just don't care about any of that shit. So it's like with Saddles, like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like, and I understand that can't exist for a lot of like hyper competitive things, but like Saddles isn't ever going to be that. So it's like Saddles is, and again, I don't know what Saddles is going to be, but I'm just not going to limit it by saying all this like stuff about what you can and can't do. Like a lot of us run these, right? That's why I had a big problem with the gear requirements this year at Cocodona. I was not happy about it. And I don't think it's appropriate for race directors to be telling runners how to run their race and or like what they need to run their race. Yeah. And there are some of us that can run that section very easily on 2 liters of water.
Yeah.
And well, not saying that everyone should do, like, obviously, no, like most people shouldn't do that. But a race mandating what you have to carry, even if it's in their best interest, I just don't like it. It's not something. It's actually a big reason why I don't like running in Europe. I don't like running races in Europe because I don't want to carry all that shit. I hate carrying shit. It, like, for a guy that doesn't, like, I never wear a vest. I don't like stuff on my body, and like body kinesthetics are sensitive. You put 5, 6, 7 pounds on my back, I run completely differently,
right? And
that affects my race. And so like I don't want to carry all that shit around Mont Blanc. Yeah, I don't want to carry snow pants in 85-degree weather. It's like when you're running through a village every 10 miles, it's like these are not like crazy wilderness. Anyway, I'm going on a whole gear mandatory tangent.
No, I appreciate it.
But it's like it's like I don't remember why I started talking about saddles, but it's
but I wanted to say something about that. And like I totally vibe with you, and I agree that like if people want the freedom to jump in at mile 20 of Saddles and do the final 50K, that's great. And that's actually something like that sort of laissez-faire approach to racing. Like I identify with that. I think that if it's not 99%, it's probably 90% of runners, like they're super, like rituals and traditions and formalities are super important to them. I think most humans want predictability. And I think in our community, most people want something to show for what they just did. I think they need that, like, even if you just have to kind of roll your eyes and create the 50K, like they want that, you know?
Yeah.
With Cocodona, like I honestly, if there was going to be no proof that I did Cocodona, I would still do it because I love that course so much. Like, yeah, I needed nothing to show for. Like that was totally for me. But I think most of us need like the validation, so it's important to have it there.
I think it's good to reflect on why you need that stuff, though. You know?
Oh yeah,
it's like,
I mean, I've done stuff for validation all the time. Like I'm not immune to that. I do it probably once or multiple times a day.
It's like I alluded to the belt buckle thing earlier. Is like, why do you guys all want belt buckles? Like I think I have, like I've done a lot of races where I have belt buckles. I think I've already lost my Cocodona belt buckle. You know what I mean? It's like, that's like not great probably to say that, but it's like it's like why, like and I think that's another example of like saddles can exist sort of on this extreme end of that spectrum where it's like hopefully makes you question why we're doing these things, what are our motives, Like, do I need, like, what if I created a social media ban on saddles? What if I made everyone sign a waiver at the beginning that said you're not allowed to talk about your run on social media? Like, that's fun.
I mean,
that's a cool idea. Actually, I mean, I just had that idea for the first time. Like, but just like, what if? Like, how many people would do it?
how many do you think would? Do you think you would sell out?
I think the type of person that already runs saddles is sort of embracing the experience. So I think that
So you've already kind of routed the right person.
I would be curious though, how many people that would check that box and how many people would be able to fulfill that.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I get made fun of all the time about how, like, I'm the only person in the world that's ever, like, finished 100-miler and not talked about it on social media. Even like Cocodona, I never said anything about it other than Satisfy creates posts and they're like a collab or whatever. So it's like, and again, I'm not trying to sound like elitist or whatever. It's just interesting conversations. Like, why are we doing these things? Like, why are we running 50-milers? We all know we can run. I mean, in our case, for example, like, or why are we running 50Ks for the 100th time? Like, you can run a 50K. Like, is it to be a part of the race, or is it to get a t-shirt, to get a glass, to get a belt buckle, to post about it on Instagram, to share, to get attention? And again, not even saying those are bad things. Like, there's something about the human nature and the human psyche that, like, attention feels good. And instead of me tearing down people, well, I tear it down when people drive around with like flags on their fucking diesel trucks because they want attention. Like, that shit annoys me. But like, there's something about attention that feels good from other human beings being validated and being popular, or being like just receiving attention. There's something about the human condition where that feels good. So instead of me tearing that down and saying that's not a good thing, I mean, I don't think it's a good thing to become addicted to or to like become obsessed with, but there is clearly something about the human condition that, like, human beings lean into that. So I think it's good to identify those things, and to have like a more, I think it's good to identify those things and have an appropriate relationship with those things instead of becoming addicted to those things. And attention can come in any form. It can come into being asked to be on a podcast. It can come being asked to be a part of a documentary, or getting a lot of attention on social media, however that looks on whatever, you know what I mean? Like, or just being like a popular person in your community. Like when you go to a group run and people want to take photos with you or whatever, it's like, there's a lot, or people want to introduce themselves to you because they saw your podcast and they're big fans of you or whatever, you know, it's like attention feels good, right? So like, well, I don't know what I'm talking about again, because I did what I've been doing all, it's like, like, yeah, I think the social experiment, I think I might actually do this, putting a button on saddles saying you're not allowed to share stuff. You're not allowed to share your story. Just as an experiment.
What if you could only share it using technology that existed before like the year 2000 or something?
That'd be cool.
Like, what if you had to you could write letters to people or something about it?
Or you could make a film about it, but it would have to be on something that used film.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think this is a really good conversation to answer the question earlier about like what I see saddles being. It's like I see saddles being just like this opportunity to like try shit and just like see what happens, because I don't care about, I mean, I want people to sign up because I think it's a really good experience. Like, I think everyone who ran saddles last year like had a really great time except for me, but I was the race director. So like I think I'm the only one with anything negative to say about the race last year. And I think that's how it should be, probably, because that's like my job title. So I want people to run it, to experience it, and to like have a good time and to like do all of those things. But other than that, I really don't care how many people sign up. Like, it already has enough people. I think like 80 or 90 people are already signed up, and that's almost how many people ran last year. So like,
that's great.
I don't really care, like, again, other than wanting people to experience it. But it's like, I just think it's this cool thing. I think again, to go back to other conversations, when you're not motivated by the money, you can try all these weird things, and you can be creative. Like you can just treat it like an art project and just make it as weird as you fucking feel like making it. And that's more exciting to me than me making like 50 grand on it or whatever. Or like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I was looking at the Arizona Monster like sold out. I was like, holy shit, it's like
Prince money.
It's like $900,000. Holy shit. Like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of those entries are like not paid for, but it's like whatever, it's like, or like Cocodona, like what is it now? How much is it?
I don't know. You'll have to check, but go look at that waitlist on Ultra Sign Up. It's burly.
Yeah, it's insane. It's just like what I think, but with Saddles, it's like, yeah, the numbers we're dealing with at Saddles are like clearly not that. And like all the money just goes back into the race. So it's like, it's actually, I mean, Saddles doesn't cost me any money, but it costs Satisfy a lot of fucking money.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
At Saddles, because the Fane Ranch aid station that Satisfy runs, do they create aid stations at Saddles in the same image? Because I loved that aid station.
So I had them do the start finish line. So the start finish line was Satisfied out.
That's awesome.
But the aid stations weren't. It was just a little bit too much for the first year, and just and a lot of that's on me, to be totally honest. Like Brees, again, the owner of Satisfy, he's constantly throwing these ideas that he wants to do, and I'm just like constantly shutting him down because it's just a lot of work, and it's like I don't really want to do. I'm actually kind of the wrong guy to be in the race director role for that race, because I'm like shutting things down a lot of the time. But the Matt that's going to help me take over the races in Utah, he's going to come on at Saddles as well. And he's a lot better at the bells and whistles side of things, and like the community side of things. Like he's a community organizer and like does like farmers markets and things. So like the idea of like closing down a block of the street and having like a bunch of activities for people, like it doesn't scare him, where to me I'm like pretty intimidated by it. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, yeah.
I have a kid coming on September 28th. Allegedly, that's the due date. But if I didn't have a kid on the way, I would be there. It sounds like a blast. We'll throw a link in the show notes, and
that's awesome, dude. I'm really happy for you. Is it your first kid?
First kid, and I mean, I think for all the reasons you described, like I've led a pretty selfish existence until now, and even just
yeah.
Well, but like even just the thought of having a kid has made me reevaluate, and it's going to be good for me. Like again, selfishly, it's going to be good for me because I think it's going to force me to realize that I'm not the most important person in the world and someone else is. And I think just a lot more wholesome decision making and like contributions come from that. And it sounds like that's been the case for you. So I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're like me or not, in the sense of like I've sort of lived my whole life in this like constant flux of like existential like crises of like not knowing like why I'm here, why I want to be here, like what excites me to be alive. And like having a child, out of all the shit I've talked about experiencing life and being an active member of the human race, nothing I've ever done has ever come close to like the satisfaction and fulfillment of like having this little girl that I am completely fucking obsessed with. And I'm about to start crying on your podcast, but I'm gonna pull it back.
I feel that, dude. I mean, honestly, I've never really had existential dread, but I attribute this, and this is a little bit self-deprecating, but it's true. I don't think I'm a like high IQ person. All the high IQ people that I know have existential dread, you included. And like, I'm not quite there in terms of processing power. So I don't think too deeply about like my like role on the planet. Like I'm just, if I'm like engaged in something and it's like occupying me and I'm stoked on it and I feel like it could put a small dent in some little subculture, like I'm rolling,
That's awesome.
but have never been like, why am I here type stuff. But that's for like 150 people and up. I'm probably like 110, 120.
Well, I don't give yourself credit, but maybe you're just better at processing things than we are.
I don't know.
But
I don't know.
It's like, dude, I'm super happy for you. That's awesome. And I don't know. I feel really excited for you. And yeah, I get really so I'm 38, and out of all of my closest friends in this world, I'm the first one to have kids.
Wow. Kind of us too. For my wife and I, there's like one other friend, but like, yeah, what's it been like?
And it's like it's hard because like I look around this world and I see the people that do procreate and like the ones that are having kids, and it's like that kind of like, ooh, not just for the kids but for the parents too. Like they're either too young, or like they're not like stable in their lives, and like all these things, like people that are having kids, like, and just like, yeah, just there's a lot of reasons why. And then I look at like some of my closest friends, and like not only would they make like the absolute best parents in the world, but I think they're also the type of people like me that would stand to gain the most from having a child. Like I think I am a much better person than I was a year and a half ago, or at any other in any other point in my life. I feel like I'm the best version of myself that I've ever been. And like I selfishly, like I've gained a lot. I'm a better husband, I'm a better friend, I'm a better everything, and it's because of her. And it's like, and so I look at my friends who are not having kids, and it makes me sad a little bit. Not because of their decision. I mean, they're adults, and they're like, I respect their decision. I just know like how amazing it has been for me, and for like, and the kid that I have. Like, she's gonna have the best fucking life ever, and that's given me a new lease on life and motivation to like give her that. Like I don't necessarily have the motivation for myself to go out and like seize the fucking day, and like make the most out of my life. But since it's for her, she's going to have the best life I can possibly give her. And it turns out that's a pretty awesome life, because I've been lucky, and I have connections, and I have friends all around the world, and they're all her fucking godfather. It's like she has she has French godparents, Spanish godparents, and American godparents. And it's like, I don't know, you guys have to.
Bryce is one of them, right?
Like,
Bryce is one of them.
Yeah, and he is. And it's like you guys are all just gonna have to fight over it. She's gonna have to do like 4 months. You know what I mean? And so it's like it's just given me an entirely new lease on life, and it's crazy. And I know that's not the experience that everyone has when they have kids, but it was for me, and I wish that sort of fulfillment on everyone. Yeah. So I wish that on you. And
well, it means a ton. And honestly, like I say, we pin the conversation here. I have to go on a hike with my wife. We kind of do our nightly hikes in her pregnant state, and it's our way to connect. But
way more important.
I want to do a round 2 if you're down, because I have so much. Like, we could talk for hours. I love this.
Yeah, no, I'm totally down. Let's do a round 2 in a few months, or maybe let's do a round 2 after you have a kid. And
yes,
and we'll talk then.